Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show tonight. Welcome, everybody. It is Thursday, so you know what time it is. It's time that we get together. We talk about these Seahawks. We talk about what's been going on in the Seahawks world. We've had a preseason game since we last met. We've had some training camp. We've had, for the first time in over 30 years, joint Seahawks practices with another team. So there's some stuff to talk about. We've got a game coming up on Saturday. And the only way we're going to be able to get through all this is if I have a partner. So tonight, Brandon of the Hawks Nest joins us. How you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing great, man. The vibes have just been nothing but glorious here coming through camp so far for the most part. And that puts a big smile on my face. Not to mention, man, we're close and closer to this stuff being live, real, and counting.
That's right. That's right. And so far, I mean, I don't think they could be doing things much better than they are. Like, you're never going to be perfect in this league, especially when you're talking about a team made up of 90 players right now, and you've got brand new offense, brand new defense, but there's a lot more to get excited about than there is to be cautious about, I think.
Very much so. You look at a new coaching staff coming in this way and having to do things sort of new in very detail-driven manner from where they were maybe before to specific areas. And there's, I think, some overlap here between coaching staffs and their style and the way they go about it. But I think that you expect with this kind of transition, Brendan, there to be these obvious signs of the coach having to kind of get through it. You have a first-time coach, and how's he going to deal with this? How's he going to deal with that? And it's been very, very fluid and seamless here, this process that they've undertaken, where you really never felt like they're not out there getting great work in. It sounds like the practices have been, and to my eyes, it was this way as well. Business, workmanlike, getting the good work in there. Everybody is on their P's and Q's, Brendan, and you can't find any of those real moments yet where you're standing out there going up, first-time coach. Oh, well, and maybe this will happen once we get to the games. But as far as at least where we've been so far, it's been very impressive to see McDonald onboarding here as this new coach.
That's right. So we got some stuff to go through tonight. Obviously, we've got a game coming up, but before we get to what will be, I want to talk about what has been. So what has been since we last met was, of course, a preseason game against the Chargers. Game number 1 for Mike McDonald. Game number 1 for this new regime. And overall, you got to say, that was a pretty positive experience, right? That was it wasn't quite perfect, but that was way more good than bad for the first taste of Mike McDonald football.
Boy, as I say, I think it's as good as you could ask for, both in this transition process, and that preseason game was an extension of this as well. I think, Brendan, to your point, you go out there defensively, you run pure, pretty much vanilla on the front. You are changing the coverages and doing that stuff on the back, but you're not trying to throw everything at a Charger team in the preseason game just to make yourself feel better, or that you want to try to, again, this comes back to the worry you might have if you're McDonald coming in here, that my scheme's not quite getting instituted as fast as I'd like. They're not picking up it in practice as much. Okay, so we've got to do this stuff in the games then for them to get this stuff. And instead, he more dialed back on that, just let them go out and play. And yet they still went out there and, especially on the defensive side of the ball, dominated. Now, how good is the backup quarterback situation for the Chargers? You hear from them saying you hear that it's not been good there coming out of camp from them either. But nonetheless, 3 points is 3 points. And you held them down in the run game in addition to it, which is one of those things we're looking for to take a step forward. So that all happening and occurring. Offense, I thought, was efficient enough, and you got to see a bit of what Grubb can bring, where he's going to attack you everywhere, the implementation of the screen game. And you can see some stuff where you're going to have him make some adjustments, batted balls down at the line of scrimmage and whatnot, going down that game. We had 3 or 4. But overall, Brendan, I can't. It would be great if you went out 45-0 it in the first and just utter dominance. Yeah, but this isn't that far either from it. My standpoint of being impressed with this. And the last part, just I'll say, is the young guys we're seeing, second, your players, guys you're wanting to see rise up, a Derek Hall type, are stepping forward. It looks like too, and that you're getting that development with it.
Mm-hmm. Right. So let's spend some time talking about that game. Let's start with the defense, because that's the side of the ball that everyone's really pumped up about right now. Let's have our dessert first. We can save the veggies for later. And the veggies are not bad, man. They're like they're really well done veggies. I'll say that, right?
Yeah, like you can get them down. You get them down the goal, Brendan.
Mm-hmm. Totally. So, looking at the defense, I think the main thing that stood out to me in terms of like things that are surprising would be, and I made a whole video about this. I don't know if you saw this, but Doug Farrar tweeted about this. The variety of coverage schemes utilized in this game. So he actually went through every play the Seahawks defense ran. And by the way, it was not that many plays because they did a really good job getting off the field. But
0 for 8 on third downs to start the game off.
Oh yeah, and what was it, like 2 for 12 at the end?
2 for 12 at the end. Yeah.
Yeah. And 0 for 2 on fourth down too, if you want to throw that in there. So pretty good.
Stifling.
So according to him, they went cover 1 21% of the time, cover 2 8% of the time, 2-man, which is basically, cover 2 except the corner, you're playing zone underneath, 13%, cover 3 21%, cover 4 21%, cover 6 17%. So that is a really evenly distributed mix of basically every kind of coverage scheme you can throw at an offense. So already we're seeing us do something that we haven't seen this team do in 15 years almost. So that's the first thing that jumps out to me with this defense.
It's a part that was part of my frustration last year and not seeing it from the team or not seeing it in recent years. It's a bit akin to not using motion on offense as a steadying force. And the reason being is that you can understand, even if you're just a layman that understands very little about football, that if I show you this before the snap and then it becomes that, and I have a willingness to show you a variety of things pre-snap and a willingness to show you a variety of things post-snap, then you have no other idea from your pre to post-snap recognition as to what the hell I'm doing. And that is a huge benefit into the back of the defense. And yet we have not utilized it. We've utilized it at a league least rate last season. Those statistics are unarguable. And you can see in a game like this, where, to my point earlier on this, you ran vanilla to the front, the complexity on the back. The complexity on the back is going to mess with quarterbacks, and you saw it here in this game, and it's going to do so in the regular season. And if we face backup types, this is one of the reasons I've said, Brendan, that the era of backup dominance will now be over, because no longer are we dropping in cover 3 drops to depth to be dinked and dunked the whole day. Now you're going to be up there squeezing those routes. Now you're going to be up there confusing those backup quarterbacks, showing you why they're backup quarterbacks.
That's right. And also, I looked at these numbers that Doug gave us, and I noted that you had cover 1 and 2-man combined to be about 34%, so 1/3. And those are two defensive schemes where your corners are going to be playing man. So I think that is reflective of the fact that McDonald, who did run mostly zone in Baltimore, has come in here, looked at what he has, and realized, I've got 2 really good man corners here in Witherspoon and Woolen. So I'm going to run man a little more than I might have in Baltimore because of that. And I know 34% doesn't seem like a huge number, but the teams in the NFL that run man the most run it about 50 to 52% of the time. So 34 would actually be more than the average.
I think you're onto something here with this, Brendan, and I think it's a bit of a follow the trail like a detective on this one. We know with, you just said McDonald, he tries to utilize his players and what they do well. We know in 3 guys specifically in this secondary, being Tariq Woolen, Devin Witherspoon, and to a lesser degree, Trey Brown, that they're kind of at their best in man coverage situations. So by that nature alone, you would think that there's going to be a pull for him to go to more man coverage situations. I would argue with you, Brendan, that as you got into the depths of that game, if we were to look at the number breakdowns on that, I bet you were running more of the man stuff early on in the game when you had Witherspoon, Brown, and Woolen out there on the field versus later on in the game, where I bet it was not run at the same frequency. It was probably more of the cover 6, more of the other stuff there where they're going to protect those guys over the top a little bit. So your 50% ratio, us maybe dancing in that area of things this year as a potentiality. The only other thing just kind of firmly kind of pushes it down for me is maybe a real reality here, Brendan, is the old draw of this defense. You know, this defense, when you trail it all the way back, when you pull the thread all the way down the line to it, inherently wants to have its cover corners on the outside who can lock the guys down in man coverage, and then they can unleash bloody hell from the front 7. So Revis Island, they were running this defense during the Revis Island days. The Cromartie and Revis combination with those 2 guys in man coverage on the outside, so that Rex Ryan could run all of his crazy stuff. His father could run all of his crazy stuff with his bare fronts on the front side of it. And you have the ability to do that if you can trust the man guys on the outside. And what they're doing right now, I think, Brendan, is they're running it also at a high rate to see if they can do it and get away with it. And this last game taught them, yeah, we might be able to get away with running that. And I think they will be able to, because these guys aren't just good man cover corners. In Witherspoon's and Woolen's case, highest rated cover corners in man last year over, I think, just about anybody else. It was just the fact that they weren't in them at a high ratio to your degree on that.
Yeah, and in many ways, we're very lucky that Witherspoon was able to play zone at such a high level last year, because he did not really do that much in college. He was a man cover corner. When we drafted him, I assumed that, we're going to be playing a lot more man defense, and that didn't really happen. But he's so good, he's able to excel anyway. But that doesn't change the fact that I think a switch back to man coverage would help him a lot.
I really think it's a thing that can take this defense up a notch, because now you can dedicate the resources to the front seven, both to stop the run and generate pass rush out of those blitz packages. And he inherently is naturally going to have those stack boxes on the line of scrimmage, Brendan. So they're already there. They're already on the doorstep anyway. Why not just walk on in? And that's where you said in Baltimore, you were right. That's not what he was doing in Baltimore. But remembering going back to Baltimore, it was more zone-based because he was learning lessons from Martindale, who was staying in that man-based coverage concept stuff too much, even when his backup guys couldn't run. And he goes, look, when you got your backup guys in, you got to run the zone stuff. You can't lean on him as man. If you got the man guys that can do it, well, then you run it when you got them to do it. And I think he understands that. And there's some hard-headed coaches, I think, that as much as, again, that sounds straightforward, they go, no, just stay in man. He should hold up out there. I'm only asking him to hold up for 2 seconds. How hard is that to do?
Right. So that was one of the big things that stood out to me. And by the way, the other thing that Doug pointed out was that despite the fact the Seahawks blitzed less than any other team in preseason week 1, except for the Niners, they rushed 4 on like 80% of their snaps. They generated pressure at a higher rate than anybody else. And it wasn't that close. So it worked. It's not just that they did it. It's that they did it. And I know Easton Stick is not some great NFL quarterback. We know that from last year, but it worked.
It did, especially when you look at the Chargers through at least 2 to 3 quarters there were before that at the end, they were actually starting to try to push the ball down the field. There's a lot of short passes, Brendan. It's a lot of quick getting the ball out of the quarterback's hand where the pass rush can't even really have a chance to get in there and get home. It also speaks to this is the depth of the pass rush you bring, where your second, your third stringers are legitimate guys. Derek Hall didn't start in this game. He came off the bench. Byron Murphy didn't start in this game. He came off the bench, and you're throwing that at their second stringers, and they're going, dear God, this is their second stringers? These are their twos? Or they're playing their ones for longer today, right? No? 2, 3? Okay. So I think you got that all the way through the game, and you saw and you did feel that, and you got a little bit of McDonald's flavoring in there a little bit with his fronts up there, where he didn't run necessarily a ton of stuff with the stack boxes, Brendan, but you could see from his alignment splits the way that it'll look differently than it ever otherwise does. We had last year, our commonality was those 2 defensive tackles. You got the 1 tech, or he's in a 2 tech, and then you got the 3 tech, and then you have the wide 9 guys and outside. And well, now what you'll get, like we saw in that game, the Byron Murphy near sack, for instance, Murphy aligned as a 4-eye, so a 4 inside in, like he'd be in a 3-4. Then you've got Mike Morris, I think it was to the side of him there, or it might have been Miles Adams, I can't remember, but he's to the side of him there at defensive tackle. Then you've got Derek Hall, and he's not just in a wide 9, Brendan. He's like another 2 persons worth of space outside of the wide 9. It's like he's coming off of it like a nickel corner would from basically his angle of it. And he comes up and forces the pressure initially, right? Coming off that angle, because the tackle's got to come all the way out here to when you're in that wide 9, the tackle goes from having to meet a guy here to having to meet a guy out here, because the angle requires you to have to really widen out your pass set to get out there. And so he first challenges him, forces the quarterback in the pocket. Then you're running a loop game with Byron Murphy around the defensive tackle there at the same time, and he's there right ready to catch the quarterback when he steps up in the pocket. That's where that whole pass rush is married to each other and what they're doing both post-snap and then the alignment and the way that you structured it too as well.
Right. So there's some really exciting stuff going on here. And I know it's just one preseason game, but, a lot like people were showing clips of Byron Murphy in this game. And that's probably the next area we're talking about. That may have been our best player in that whole game on either side of the ball. And, they're pointing out, he's not going up against starters, but he's going up against NFL caliber players. He's going up against guys that are going to be in the league, guys who are going to be on rosters. Like the guy he beat for his tackle for loss. That's a 6'5", 300+ pounder interior offensive lineman who is clearly an NFL player. That's not just some practice squad body. That's not a training camp body.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Byron Murphy, I know you already made some videos talking about him at length a little bit, but that was as advertised, right? He was very disruptive, very hard to deal with. To my eye, I don't know if I'm right on this or not, but it looked like he was playing a lot of nose tackle in this game, and he was still getting penetration.
Yeah, I don't know if exactly other I mean, maybe that one snap where he got the TFL in the backfield on the tackle for loss, he was in a 3 tech, but I think you're right. Aside from that, he was pretty much in a nose tackle role. And that was interesting because I think he is at his best as a 3 tech when it's all said and done. He can do the 1 tech stuff and do it well, as he showed. He can root down and you can put a double team on him, and he just goes dead leg with one leg and locks out the other leg and just sort of just roots himself down there. And you can't move him, even if you got 2 guys. We saw that in this game. He was awesome both against the run and against the pass. He is a guy whose star continues to rise. And Brendan, it's not just about this game, as we'll say with a lot of these guys. It's about what you've stacked up in OTAs and how you look there. And then how have you looked in training camp? And have you been practicing hard? And are the returns good from what we're hearing? And you and I have heard from a variety of different players who've come out and spoken about Byron Murphy and understanding how hard it is to get vets at times to speak about the rookies in this way. They want them to earn it. And I think he is earning it by how he's showing how he's playing. So as far as his upside this season and where he's going to go and what, as you said, as advertised is maybe the way to say it, keep coming back to we thought, and we had maybe a sneaking suspicion on draft day, Brendan, that we had gotten maybe the steal of the draft. Fans love to say that. Fans love to jump onto that really quickly and easily. But I think that there's a real concrete case to be made why this was the steal of the draft and how you got him. The 14 straight offensive players, which has never happened in NFL history to start out a draft. And then the Colts doing what they did, which was very specific and was not, you would agree with me, I'm sure on this, intentioned around simply getting the best defensive player. They were reaching for a specific need for that particular team. And I think this is how you land a guy like this. This is how you end up with a guy that's this good, despite the fact you got him at 16.
Yeah, and I have a feeling he's not going to put up monster numbers. But if you watch every game, you're going to see him affect the game constantly in ways that go beyond the numbers. I've compared him a lot this offseason to Clowney, Jadeveon Clowney, who was another guy who never put up the big numbers. But if you watch the games and you watch him play, and I know we did this a lot when he was here for 1 year, and I think we both really appreciated the Jadeveon Clowney experience, even though he had like 3.5 sacks that year. But watching the games, this is a very destructive guy who's very hard to deal with. And he's messing up the things that you do, even if he's not the one getting the actual tackle or sack at the end of the play. I think Murphy can kind of be like that. So we'll see where things go. Obviously, he is going to have to face better players once the season starts, but it's starting to feel like he's going to be a very meaningful contributor when the season gets going.
You're even hearing about practices during the Titans this week of him looking good in these practices as well. And it just continued to be more. And that's how a player, starts to play and go, wow, he's so good right out the jump. He's been good out the jump here since he's come along through this whole process. And like you, I'm not saying I think it's going to be some tremendous amount of production. It's hard for those defensive tackles, even when they're at their best, to always give you that top end production that stands out versus the edge rushers. But like you said, he'll be having an impact. He'll be wrecking the game in both areas of the play as far as against the run and the pass. And one thing those stack boxes are going to do, Brendan, we saw him a lot of double teams in this game. Hell, he even got a triple team like we had seen with him in college at certain times for a half heartbeat in this game. Those stack boxes, I know I've hammered on this a couple of times, but it's just worth noting one of the benefits of it is that you have a guy like this that can't simply be neutralized by teams saying, just throw the double on him. Even if he's at the 3 tag, throw the double on him, because the stack boxers are going to pull those protections off. They're going to require the lineman to single up on guys. And that's a lot of how he helped to get Justin Madubuike get to that kind of production like he did last year, was keeping those one-on-one situations inherently play after play there for that player. And Byron's tough. If you're going one-on-one pure with him, I don't care starter or not. That's going to be it seems like a long day at the office for who's ever trying to block him.
All right. So next guy I want to spend a little bit of time on from that game would be Derek Hall, because it looked different. It looked different from last year. Derek Hall, obviously very disappointing rookie year, basically didn't do anything. Presumably had opportunities to work his way onto the field because we did have some injuries at that position, and it just didn't happen. This year, so far, we're hearing better things from camp, and we definitely saw better things in that preseason game. What do you see with him so far that you feel like is quantifiably different, if you had to try to put it in those terms?
Well, I think probably last year we can reach back to the shoulder injury being we wondered if it was problematic last year and that it was kind of lingering and ongoing. And I think it probably was. Did that affect his ability to train last year? Certainly would have affected his strength and power. And this is a guy who has a little bit of quickness and has a little bit of decent athleticism. He's got kind of that Frank Clark thing where it's okay for his size and length. He's got the good athleticism. Not that you'd call him super quick. You wouldn't go Von Miller on this guy, but for that quickness, for that size package, that can work as long as he can use his power at its most. It all works off of the power, the long arm bull rush that he has, his ability to just kind of overwhelm tackles off the edge. And I did think that you got to get a little bit of a flavor of that in this game at times where that play, like I said, Byron Murphy, where he's lined out so wide. If you don't have a guy that's explosive and quick enough to get upfield to that spot, all the defensive ends would be doing that, right? The reason they don't is because they're slow as hell and they can't cover that amount of ground to get to that space to force that quarterback up in the pocket. But you saw him also in on the run game. I think you see him as a second-year player hitting his run game keys and being in on it. He had a couple times he had to scrape the line of scrimmage and he was unblocked and he had to read it. You know, there's one play where it was a read option play of the quarterback. He's got to verify the quarterback doesn't keep it there, gives it to the running back. He verifies that, then goes and makes the tackle on the running back. It might look like a play where the guy's just sliding down and tackling the guy, but he's got to first make sure that quarterback doesn't go outside his outside shoulder. And he does that. So you see him a little bit on the P's and Q's in this game when he was playing, and he was having an impact in both sides. He had the one sack that was really Murphy, but he also had a couple of pressures in there where he was a hand length away from getting there. And again, going back to it, the Chargers offense in this game was very much, Brendan, we're just going to pop gun it. You know, it's a lot of just get the ball out of the guy's hands quick.
Right. So definitely excited there. And I mean, we're going to need it. We're definitely going to need him this year. Definitely got to get that edge rotation going. And depending on what happens at some other positions, it might be the fourth edge is going to be Nelson Caesar, because we may decide we'd rather save the money on Taylor. And then you've got Dre'Mont Jones kind of doing part-time edge stuff. So Caesar becomes kind of your in theory, fourth edge player, because Dre'Mont Jones is still counted as like a defensive lineman, even if he occasionally moves out there. And I wouldn't count on Nelson Caesar for that much as a rookie. I would just kind of count on him for a few snaps a game, maybe.
And Darrell Taylor still didn't play in this game. We'll see if we're going to see him here in this upcoming game. But you know, you've got to think that that's pulling on John here a little bit. There's this, and it's a bit like with Eskridge too as well. It's like, okay, well, you know, I know you, but both of these two guys, I think John's got this. I want to make this work. You know, salvage these second round picks. But maybe that's not just going to happen. And there's a lot of reason to believe there's other guys that are better suited to be here than those guys, especially in the case of Taylor, taking into account that $3 million you mentioned. And, you know, this is why Hall's development's huge here. You know, this is why him solidifying himself in that third spot is going to be so big, because you have the Dre'Mont there for the early rundowns. Now you just need some vitality of rotation, and you need the guy that can play the run too. He can give you both on that, so that everything feels then really solidified for a full, long NFL season.
Yeah, I did hear that Taylor looked good yesterday at the joint practice, so I'm prepared for just about anything. You never know, but I still kind of feel like I'm still trying to get my head around that contract we gave him that had like $20,000 guaranteed and the rest was like non-guaranteed. It feels like it means something. He's not going to ever be good against the run. So he's got to be brilliant as a pass rusher, or he's just got to be at least efficient and effective, which he lost last year. He wasn't able to be efficient for you as a pass rusher. And okay, so you're not going to develop as a run defender. That's fine. Go out there in the situational role. Give me 7, 8, 9 sacks as that fourth kind of edge when you come in as a pass rusher. Then fine. You can find that role in the NFL. You can still have kind of a long career in that role, but solidify yourself in that way. Don't be the streaky shooter that you've been since day one here. It's 4 sacks and then a whole lot of nothing for 10 games or something like that. That's not going to get it done. And you might as well just go with Nelson Caesar if that's going to be the case, especially in the savings of the money. All right. Next thing, I want to talk about these linebackers, because I got to tell you, I was pretty impressed with some stuff we saw with that linebacker crew. And I wasn't really expecting to be, because no Jerome Baker, right? And you're going up against a Chargers team that you figure is going to just be pounding the rock this year. So there was a part of me that kind of expected them to win that battle on the ground. They did not. And I guess you would start probably with our highest PFF graded defender for the day. Let's start with Tyrese Knight. First ever NFL action of any kind. He's doing good in coverage. I think he allowed like 4 yards on a screen pass where it was 3rd down and like 8, and he prevented the first down. He knifed in there, made the play. He looked good on some other plays as well. Like I was impressed. That was better than I expected.
I'd share your feeling on it. I didn't expect him to look this good. His first preseason action, you think there'd at least be some nerves? Say nothing of, was the tape this good of what I saw off UTEP? Not necessarily. He physically had it, but there were certainly spots where you go, ooh, ooh. And he went through this whole game. He played 30, I think, snaps in total. So it's not a small sample size. And I did think that he was really good all around, tackling, his instincts, filling a gap. There was one play, Boye Mafe didn't seem to trust him on a gap fill, and Boye lost the edge to try to help him out on his gap, and he was right there next to Boye. Boye kind of ends up neutralizing him out of the play. Running back bounces it outside and ends up, leaving out the door that basically Boye Mafe left on the play because he was trying to help out. So he looked really good, and Radigan as well, Brendan. Those guys were right. Radigan was much lesser rated, but I thought he had very close to an equivalent level of play in this game of how he did at the linebacker position. And that was very encouraging to see him out there because he was instinctive and he looked even a shade quicker and faster, I think, than he looked last year to me. It didn't look quite as plodding as it had been last year. And there's the instincts are definitely coming up a notch with him too.
Yeah, year removed from the ACL injury, you're going to get a little bit faster, you would assume.
Mm-hmm.
So I could believe that. Yeah, I was going to mention Radigan. He had 2 sacks in this game. I thought he played pretty well overall. And I know Dodson played like 6 snaps, but in that array of snaps, he had 1 really good run stop at the line of scrimmage. And I was impressed with a little bit we got of him. So that was encouraging because that inside linebacker spot, you figure, and it may still end up being the case, is when the regular season starts, is going to be a weakness of the team.
You do worry that that's going to be the case. And I think one thing I'll say that they all had that was maybe a little different from what we've seen from the position recently is the level of aggressiveness, attacking the gap, attacking the run fits, not catching things, not in feeling read and react, but feels like they're getting downhill on top of stuff, which I think is what partly is helping them look as good. But I agree with you. Dodson looked really good as well. And reports of camp has looked, he's really good. And can't forget with this guy, he wasn't just a one-year wonder there. It was a matter of he was stacked on the depth chart behind some really good linebackers there in Buffalo and has had to wait to get that opportunity to shine. And he's very maybe ready to go out there and pull that off on it. So I thought that they were really good. It was also notable, Brendan, I think when you look at the PFF grades, I believe seven of the 8 grades are all linebackers, either inside linebackers or outside linebackers. So, I don't know if, we wondered if McDonald is the linebacker whisperer here or not. I don't know if he is, but I thought that was kind of funny that the first game out the gate, all of the best rated guys for him on a defense played really well were linebackers.
Yeah. We always got to be careful with the PFF stuff. Sometimes, something doesn't pass the smell test and it's okay to call it out. Like they didn't grade Murphy very well in this game because he missed 1 tackle. And
they hit him for that, didn't they? Like 25 grade.
Yeah, and like it's 1 play, and it still created a sack at the end of the day, right? Like I understand why they're doing it, but at the same time, you can't tell me that Byron Murphy was mediocre in that game. There's no way.
No, and I think that there's definitely, this is the room that there's always there to grow with BFF on getting better and refining it. And I think eventually that we'll get this better and better, finding ways to find more nuance in their ratings where it's not a, binary 0 or 1 solution every time and how you rate it. Like sometimes, like you said, your point, you find the in between on that. And there was no in between on that when he's getting the 25 grade, despite the sack eventually being caused nonetheless.
One last thing that I want to ask you about on defense, because going to the secondary, because the secondary looks pretty loaded. I mean, we got a lot of stuff going on there. We're thick at corner. Mike Jackson came back to practice this week, so we are fat there. And now there's some stuff going on at safety. We know that Kobe Bryant obviously played a pretty good game against the Chargers. He had an interception, almost had another. Looking like that position change might end up working out okay. But you've also got Kayvon Wallace. So he's played a really good camp. I thought he played a good game against the Chargers. He helped cause that interception, I think, with his hit on the Chargers tight end. I think he played a role in that. And he's looked good. So there was some talk about how maybe the Seahawks are going to do a decent amount of 3 safety sets this year. And then you look at all the talent we've got in that cornerback room. how would you make this work? Would you consider like trading somebody, like maybe a Trey Brown, to clear a logjam in there? Or do you just want to roll forward with this abundance of depth at the position?
Well, first, I guess, Brendan, you got to make the call as I answer that question. Do you want to go with less tackling this season and have more developmental guys in your cornerback room, or go with more certainty on the tackling front in your cornerback room and have less upside in your corner room?
I mean, I do like the idea of upside, because this is not a team that's all in to win right this very second. So I tend to lean that way.
I ask because, the draft evaluations are correct sometimes when they're correct. And I'm not doing this to toot my own horn, but to push this forward for this very discussion. When we looked at the Auburn corners, the two things that were notable about each of them is that they both could cover, Brendan. That was really not a question. The question was about whether or not they could be good tacklers, whether or not they were wanting to be good tacklers, getting off blocks, instincts in the run game, all the way around, right? And you didn't see it on tape on Auburn. And you come back and you look at this game, go back down, even trace back over to look at those PFF scores. And again, you see even with those, and in this game a little bit, tackling still coming along. Not a surprise. You knew this when you got them, so it's not a shock, Brent. It's not some death knell to them. But why I say this is the choice comes down to move Michael Jackson or Trey Brown. Trey Brown's not the greatest tackler, but those are the two guys who have value out there on the open market that you could move. I don't think Artie Burns is really going to get you anything. I don't. And so you get something very minimal for those guys, but then you're going to be riding now on DJ James or Nehemiah Pritchett to be guys that can come in there and hold up on that tackling side of it. When, again, going back to college with them, it's the thing that stood out to them as the most negative thing within their college tape. And it was a mighty negative thing at that when you looked at it going, okay, this is part of what majorly makes them 6th-round picks. They've got 3rd-round talent as cover cornermen, but they got like 7th-round tackling ability from the position. And that's not going to work at the pro level.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And I think it's always a little bit embarrassing when you end up cutting a draft pick before the season starts. And that may motivate the decision-making here. Fair or not. I think that I know they were both 6th-round picks, but teams don't like to admit that they messed up that badly, even for a 6th-round pick. Sometimes it happens, but if they can avoid it, they probably will. So I do wonder if they do decide to clear a logjam that way. But
well, I think your point that, yeah, you're right. This is where we come down to, there's maybe some value to get Mike Jackson. You come back and get a 6th, 7th-round pick for Michael Jackson, something like that in the future. And there's nothing to be had by releasing one of those guys to the streets. Just giving up on one of those guys, they get signed. You don't get them onto the practice squad. You just lost the pick for nothing at that point. So it is a way that's an extra layer of calculation on this that could, to your point, drive this in that pathway.
Yeah. And I think it's worth noting that Witherspoon's health is not exactly a completely clean slate here. He did miss some time last year. He had 2 separate injuries that cost him a little bit of playing time. And I think in college, he missed a little bit of time as well. So it might not be a bad idea to go over the top on depth at that position, because you are going to be depending heavily on those guys because you are so good at that particular spot.
Yeah, I think it's more likely they keep the 4 safeties in the extra corner if they have to decide between one to the other on the roster level on that. So you mentioned the safeties. We've got our 2 starters. I think Wallace and Kobe are setting themselves in there to probably be solidified in that spot. We'll see what Marquise Blair can do here through preseason, but that's probably the way this plays. Jarek Reed's just not ready. So now do you carry the 5 or 6 corners? You carry the 5 corners, you got to make a decision on somebody. Right. If you go with the 6, you can hold on to everybody.
Yeah. I suspect they will hold on to 6. That's what I have right now. Not that hard to make a sacrifice somewhere else. Like, you can carry 4 edge players, and Dre'Mont Jones is kind of like your quote unquote 5th edge, and it's fine.
True. Very true.
Like, we've heard that Leonard Williams is playing 6 different positions this offseason. So there's going to be a lot of variety there, and you can have him kind of fill in the gaps if you have a little bit of a deficiency in one area. So they can make it work.
Yeah. There's some creative solutions here with this. And if it's where you like the talent in the future, if you're McDonald, then it makes a lot of sense as to keeping it. So, these guys haven't played bad now. And as far as the tackling numbers were, and they were real, you do have DJ James on the other side of it, who was conversely, like in college, really good in coverage in that game. So it is a very specific part of their games that they need to clean up and get better. And they're rookies, and they should be a lot of the time to do that. They're not finished products.
Mm-hmm. Anything else you want to talk about on the defensive side of the ball? We went through a lot of the things that I think were notable, but anything else stand out to you?
No, I think that was pretty much the coverage from what I saw. I thought Tariq Woolen played really good to start things out. He had about 3 plays in there in his short time where he's looking locked in the weeks of practice here with Titans. He's been more of that on a few of the cutups we've seen with him, and just given hell, it looks like, to Calvin Ridley.
Oh, yeah.
Ridley's just having all I can take there with Tariq. But I do think that it's been encouraging to see from him on his bouncing back this year. He looks like he's gonna have a strong year. And if you can have 2 all-pro like corners out there on the edge, Brendan, say nothing of what we might have on the inside, you just imagine what that can do for a defense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now let's spend a little bit of time on the offense here, which was certainly the side of the ball that was a little more mixed. On the one hand, no turnovers, really good on third down, right? They were like 55% on third down, which is phenomenal. Pretty good balance in terms of being able to run the ball and throw the ball effectively. Definitely some good things. There was also, a lack of big plays. Didn't really hit any big plays in this one. Interior offensive line was kind of hit or miss, which, should make you really excited about having Connor Williams in the building, because obviously he's not in there yet. So what were some of the things that you really liked seeing from this offense in this preseason game?
How looked more under control through the first few drives that he ran out there. About the first 3 or 4 drives, I thought he was a bit of a slightly different version of Hal than I think we've been dealing with through training camp. A little more under control in his decision making. The throws were a little bit more on point, quicker in his decision making, which was encouraging to see him maybe taking some good strong steps forward. I do think that the Chargers were running a lot of blitz games and throwing a lot of those stack fronts that we weren't throwing on the defensive side. And when you're in preseason, Brendan, and you're not preparing for an opponent like that and those kind of blitzes they're going to run, and this is the first time this defensive core, I almost felt like he was trying to impress his new head coach or something. It was wild to watch how much they were running that stuff. I thought we'd run a little bit of it too, but he really ran a lot of it throughout the course of the game. And I think that made it harder on our offensive linemen as we were spinning them through. That's just, that type of stuff's going to give you issues if you have your starters in, much less guys are spinning through all the time. McIntosh, Hololani absolutely were, I thought, on point, and that those guys have solidified themselves, no doubt. Now it's 3 and 4 guys, it sounds like, and that neither of them separated themselves one for the other, but they were both kind of equally, for lack of a better word, brilliant in how they ran. I thought they ran strong, they ran hard, they showed some quickness, they showed some acceleration, and they were both very impressive. And so I love seeing the 2 backs get a kind of a little more cemented on that back side of it. I thought the offensive line did okay. Like I said, I think a big part of the problems, if you trace it back, Brendan, is all of those stack fronts and blitzes they're bringing, and you're trying to pick things up, and that's tough to do in the preseason. McClendon Curtis is not a right tackle. He's being a good soldier in this game because you don't have the health out there to hold up, so you're throwing him out there into the fire and saying, hold up. And he's got Tulio Poto, who you and I looked at coming out of USC. I mean, that's a handful there, right? That guy was a kind of a technician coming out. That's not the type of guy you want a right guard going out to right tackle to have to deal with. But overall, it was pretty decent in the inside throughout the course of the game. Haynes, a little bit of an up and down game. He wasn't bad, didn't have any blown assignments, but early on he looked like he had a case of the nerves, and it settled down, I think, as the game went on. Bradford, I thought, looked pretty good. I thought his grade was higher than watching the All-22. I thought he was better than his grade indicated, Brendan. And watch for him. He's mastering the hip toss move. See, you're setting up right. You come up in your pass set. You're going, you're kind of set up, and the guy comes and you do that move. So it's not you putting the arms on and doing this. He's doing all this all over the tape where he trusts his power enough to just take the one big paw and throw the guy on out. And it was working. It's fun to watch. He's got another rep in there where he completely is, he's freed up. He's not blocking in pass protection. He's the center engaged and comes over there and does a kill shot right to the ribs and sends the guy flying. So Bradford, I thought, looked impressive there too, and mean and nasty and athletic, like we thought, big, long. So he was good. Stood out to me too. Receivers all did their job, Brendan. Everybody was on point. They caught the ball when the ball was thrown them to catch. There wasn't really any, major drops, I didn't think, or any bad spots from it. And so pretty good there. Overall, well encouraged though by West Offense. I think that you didn't run a lot. I think those screen games could have made a bigger difference in the game, Brendan, because I think what Grubb did is he saw the blitzes coming, blitz. And if you're getting the blitz, what are you going to do to counter blitz a lot of times? You're going to screen. Everybody's getting upfield, hit the ball, get them all upfield. And I think he was trying to do that, but you had those balls batted down a lot of times on those very screen kind of plays you're trying to hit.
Yeah, and I know the Chargers don't have all their starters out there either, but it is important to note you don't have your quarterback, you don't have your number one receiver, you don't have your number one, or actually, I don't think you had your number two tight end either. You don't have your number one running back. You have your number two running back for like 6 plays. So there's going to be a little bit of a limit, and especially with the whole big play thing, right? Because DK Metcalf, one way or the other, creates so many of Seattle's big plays, either by catching them or drawing attention from the safety to allow somebody else to get single coverage. So I think that stuff's certainly important to note when you're talking about this stuff. I too really liked what I saw from McIntosh, and I felt really good for him after that game because he's a guy who's been a little bit questioned this offseason so far, because he is a guy you haven't heard a lot about in camp, and when you have heard about him, it hasn't been great feedback. So to see him play like that, I think was really, really good.
Yeah. And it wasn't easy necessarily for him. Were huge holes where he had to fight through some tackles. He had to show off some of those runs that you would see from him at Georgia, where get through the backfield, use your acceleration. You run bigger than your size. You don't go down easily. I thought he showed off that, and that's just good when it kind of clicks in from what you saw in college. You go, yeah, this is the skill set that I thought could work here in the NFL. Not dominate or be stardom level, but can work at the NFL level, can be effective.
Yeah, I think it was Ray Roberts who had a video on Twitter talking about one of his 6-yard runs that should have been a much longer run, but one of the blockers just kind of missed. Just pointing out how that could have been a great day if that block gets filled correctly. So I think it was Ray Roberts, but it might have been somebody else, but he was like going through the footage. So he looks good. He did allow us.
He had a couple of those plays in this game. Sorry to interrupt you, but he had a couple of those plays in this game too, where you seemed like you'd had 4 of the 5 guys got it blocked up. One guy blew his assignment, and then the whole Alani run at the goal line where the team he gets tipped over, and everybody else, Haynes included, lays his block perfectly. It's going right over Haynes' side, and just Olatimi blows his block. He gets shut down at the line, and then with a 4th down stop or something. So yeah, it's a big deal that one guy and that you have everybody else doing their job, and one guy just upends the whole thing.
Yeah, McIntosh did allow a sack, which hurt his overall grade and kind of feeds into the narrative with him that he's not really a good blocker. That's the one thing, right? Because that's why Halani's pushing him for a 3rd running back. Yeah. That's why Halani might actually get more playing time in the season, because he can block, and McIntosh seems to be struggling there. So I'm really hoping that clears up.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's I believe the play that the sack comes on is one of those blitzes. And, it's definitely, I don't think he blocked it up well, but at the same point in time on those, both quarterbacks and Howell and PJ Walker in this game, Brendan, did not adjust well to looking for the blitz. Both of them, as the game went along, got speeded up in their pre-snap clock, trying to get to the snap and not recognizing what was coming. And it was as much their surprise to the blitz as it was much, let's say in this case, McIntosh, to me, blowing the block, where quarterbacks got to recognize what's going on and find his read. Because it seemed like those quarterbacks would get surprised by the blitz, Brendan, and then they're holding the ball. If you have that many rushers coming, ball's got to be out. You got to get it off to somewhere. You can't be sitting there just tapping it, thinking that you got that 7-step drop time to sit there and patty cake the ball and hope something that you don't. You're not going to have that time clock to do it. So I'm not sure if it was that exact play, but there was a couple of those snaps I saw with Howell and some of his sacks he took there where I was like, well, you got to recognize that, buddy. Ball's got to come out. Where's your hot route? I know Grubb's got you a hot route. I know he's got you a hot route. So this ain't last year. Get it out. Find your spot. And that's that. It's a subtle thing of patience. Gino does this really great. It's a quarterback coming up. You got 11 seconds on the snap count, right? 10, 9, get up his hag, or take that extra just 3 seconds and just survey around. Do that Terminator scan across the room here. See what you got, and then go to the hike to make sure that you're sure what you're seeing prior to the snap. And that's one place that in Howell and Walker's case, they definitely need to improve upon just a little bit. There's room to improve there, definitely.
So DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, JSN, Jake Bobo, we know that's going to be your top 4 receivers in some order. We don't know exactly how it goes, but those guys are making the team. Presumably, we're going to carry 2 more receivers. Most teams carry 6. Who do you think it's going to be right now? Who are your 2 guys?
Well, can we carry 6 if we've got 4 running backs and 3 tight ends?
In my early depth chart projections, I do have 4 running backs, 3 tight ends, and 6 receivers. And then I go 10 offensive linemen, and then I have 7 defensive linemen and 4 edge rushers is how I make
Who's
that
your
work.
10 offensive linemen? You got Cross, you got Cross, Fant, Lucas,
Tomlinson,
Lincoln, Haynes,
Connor Williams,
Oluwatimi.
I had I think I have Lomia on there.
Mia, okay.
Who else do I have? Forsyth's
on there, and then Curtis probably.
Forsyth's a sleeper to maybe get cut, I think, because he might not fit what we're doing, and he looked okay in the preseason game, I guess, but there were some issues.
He gives you what he gives you. He's not gonna. I mean, the problem with him is he can't push anybody off the. He's not driving anybody in the run game. That's the thing. He can hold up in pass protection, but he is pushing nobody mano a mano off the ball. And whatever he does in pass protection, I think that is harder an offensive coordinator to know that you have to kind of give that other part of it up that he just can't really do.
Yeah. Did we say Bradford?
We didn't say Bradford. So Curtis would come off for Bradford then. I guess that's where my thing isn't. Well, then it's probably the Lumea Curtis is probably who's battling it out for that spot. So you're probably right. So okay, so 6. Number 1, Laviska's your 5. So we've got to put him as certainly into the 5 role as those other 4 guys at this point. The other, 4 guys that we talked about, right? DK, Tyler, JSN, Bobo, Laviska. Laviska's got a guaranteed contract. There's 0 chance he's getting cut at this point. So comes down to then at that point, one more guy that we have that can come on the roster. To my eyes, Eskridge hasn't really done enough. Not to mention, I think he's probably limited as a guy in what he can give you special teams wise. Like he can kick off cover. You can trust that guy to be a gunner. You can trust that guy to be healthy as a gunner.
Yeah,
I don't think you can.
I think it's over with him. He's hurt now too, by the way. So
of course he is.
Now he doesn't even have the chance to fight for it, right?
I shocker on that one, Brendan. I would say that Derek Young is the guy that probably gets it because I think that he is a guy, number 1, that is a well-rounded receiver, can play inside, outside. He can run the fly sweep stuff if you find yourself down to very lean at the receiver position, and he can do that, be dynamic with the ball in his hands. And then I think he's a very good special teams player in addition to that. And that's enough to kind of, I think, win him out over White and Aesop Winston. And they're right on his heels. Those guys are probably going to the practice squad, quite frankly. But I think he'd be your guy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I have the exact same thing. I still really like some stuff that Derek Young brings to the table. He has special team stuff.
He led the team in yards in this game. Led the team in yards receiving. So it's quietly so, but he did.
Right. And again, this is a guy who 2 years ago played snaps at fullback, like Ben Skronek. Remember him from the Rams?
Yeah.
It was like that. Yeah. And it's not a big part, but that is something that you can throw at defenses that they're not really going to be ready for. A wide receiver playing at fullback is a wrinkle that defenses don't really think about that much. And if you have a guy who can do it, which Derek Young can do, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, he was landing his kick out blocks, by the way, as a fullback. Like he was hitting his blocks and actually causing a good collision and movement at the point of attack there. So yeah, he's got a good skill set. It's well-rounded. The more you can do, the better your chances of making an NFL football team. And that's definitely the case with him. And, John's also kind of got to be looking over there at Green Bay going, God, we gave up on Melton to keep this kid. We gotta keep her.
Yeah.
It's Melton going off over there at Green Bay.
Yeah. But, I like Derek, and it's easy to forget about him, right? Because he was injured all of last year, but he's got some stuff. He was one of our better graded special teamers the last 2 years as well. Just overall as like a coverage guy. So valuable.
John thought he, of all the rookies coming back from that big, great draft class, thought he was going to take the biggest step last year before that injury of any of the players in the draft class. So it also speaks to a bit of the confidence Snyder has in this kid too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to ask if you think there's any way this team is going to be able to afford to carry 4 tight ends, because after that game, there was a lot of Brady Russell talk. A lot of people buzzing about Brady Russell, and I've thought this whole offseason that Brady Russell was kind of an afterthought on this roster, like he had no real chance of actually making the team. Like maybe he makes the practice squad, and then he goes out there against the Chargers, has a really good game. Now, obviously, with the Pharaoh Brown news earlier today, it's possible that situation has resolved itself, but I want to ask you about Brady Russell. Do you think there's something there, or is this just a preseason thing?
I think I'd be more aligned of saying it's kind of just a preseason thing. Barner gives you a skill set that you need on this team. It's the same skill set that you paid $3 million to Pharaoh Brown to secure on this team. And so if Pharaoh Brown isn't here, you're going to want to make sure you have that. A guy that can move people off the ball as a blocker. And Russell has a fairly well-rounded game, but probably a little bit more of a pass catcher guy than he is really as a blocker. I think at this point he goes to the practice squad, and Barner probably makes the squad initially, but it does sound like an ankle injury of some kind with Brown. We'll have to see how serious it is. So they both end up basically here on the roster. I don't think Brady gets plucked by some other team, but he's had a good camp. He's played well beyond just this game. But Barner's a guy, even though I know he didn't play great in this last game necessarily, is a guy that I think they do trust for that skill set long term with him.
Yeah. There is a scenario where the tight ends go Fant, Barner, and then Russell. Now, if the injury with Pharaoh Brown is serious, which we don't know as of right now, we don't know. We just know that he got hurt. If the injury with him is serious, then I guess there's a scenario where it's just kind of an easy decision, and Westover is on the practice squad. But assuming that Pharaoh Brown's okay, I really don't think the Brady Russell thing makes sense. And you know, you got to be careful with this preseason stuff, right? Like I remember back in the day, we had a player named Nick Reed. He was a defensive lineman, pass rusher.
Oh, yeah.
Every preseason, he destroyed the world, and he never made the team because he didn't have NFL level skills.
He got on a couple of years in there. He played. He scored a touchdown and scored a touchdown in a game. But what your point? He wasn't great though. And he was just a guy just didn't have the skill set at the NFL level to hold up, but he could look great against the kind of backup scrub types in preseason. Absolutely, that was the case. One of those guys gets out every last bit of whatever he's got naturally.
Yeah, and we might have saw that a little bit on Saturday as well with a guy like a Sheriff, who I thought looked really good, but he's going up against the very back end of the Chargers 90-man roster. So, you know.
He played hungry, man. He played like what you want these guys to do. You coming in here fighting for your NFL life. And that was a guy that the spirit you felt from him was a guy out here. I'm going to have my impact. I'm going to make this pressure. And you're right. There's not really a chance for him to have any inroads to making this roster. But at the same point in time, he stacks up a couple performances like this. Nelson Caesar, Darrell Taylor, and they are quiet on the other end of it. Does that start to pull a little bit at the Hawks? Do you start to force them to have to consider the conversation? And I'd say so. So just keep going, kid. Keep trusting this process of competition and keep setting yourself apart like that. And let's see where it can go.
We got one super chat here. Holiest hand grenade. Thank you for the $2. Management met with Gino about a possible extension. So yeah, I did see this from Dugar earlier today.
Now, was it that the Seahawks management met with Gino, or Gino's people reached out to Seattle? Because the reports that I heard from Garofalo was that Gino's people had reached out to Seattle.
So we'll probably never know who did what. We'll probably get conflicting information and then never really get it settled. But according to Dugar, I think it was coming from management. And then according to Garofalo, it came from Gino. So who knows?
Yeah, he's got 2 years left on the deal. That's the only thing with this. And if they can get him to a contract extension, I don't have a problem with it. Part of this, though, Brendan, comes to the evaluation that I have of Geno Smith that sometimes is wildly divergent than many of the fellow Seahawks fans who see him as not the option. And so my outlook of it is that I think it's hard to find quarterbacks. I think if you have a really good one and you got a good one, get the supporting cast around him and let's let it fly. And he's a little bit older. It would be risky to do it. You do have 2 years left on the deal. I think it's better interest of the team at this point to probably wait after this year to do that deal. Let another year of the bonus bleed out. Then you only have 1 year left because if you do a new deal, Brendan, and you give new bonus money, the new bonus money is going to be clubbed up with the old bonus money. But does Gino give you a team-friendly deal like he did last time? He was the 17th highest paid quarterback in the sport last year. I think he's due to be about the 16th highest paid quarterback in the sport this year. So, we'll see. All those factors kind of have a lot going back and forth there with it. But as far as to do an extension here, he's not super old. You wouldn't sign him to a 5-6 year deal. He's going to be in here for a couple more years after. And right now, Brendan, we got to be honest with this. What's the pathway if you're really looking as a Seahawks fan to say, I want the quarterback of the future right now? I don't say this is like happily or merrily this is why I want to sign Gino, but just as seems the reality of the situation to me, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. There's not a clear pathway on that QB of the future here going into next year's draft. We're talking about that being the timeline. Like, Hal's not the guy. Okay, time to move on Gino. Okay, we're going to look at the guy here in the next year's draft. Are there some guys that could rise up? Possibly, yeah, in this draft, but the unanimous opinion on this one, I have yet to hear anybody, Brendan, on Draft Pundit on this, looking at this draft of quarterbacks, who have yet to say coming into the season, oh no, there's some good guys here. Oh, this has got some solid. If anything, you just hear a lot of trepidation about these quarterbacks right now. And I don't know if you've looked at some of them as well, but my first few of them has not been great either. I'm not impressed by what I saw. So I keep coming back to, like, yeah, it'd be awesome to have a Josh Allen there, or that kind of guy that you could go find the draft. But is that guy there, Brendan?
Well, I've done a little bit of looking at it. I've already actually made a few videos about this upcoming draft class. So the top 5, as I see it right now, you got Carson Beck, who's going to be gone unless he doesn't play well this year, in which case I don't really want him, right? Like,
yeah,
then it doesn't make sense. Sanders, who is also going to be gone unless he doesn't play good. And if he doesn't play good, I kind of don't want him.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get down to the guys you could get. You got Quinn Ewers, who I know John loves him, but he might be gone too, by the way. I mean, we just went through a draft class where Bo Nix went in the top 12, and like there was some, giant pull on quarterbacks. Like Quinn Ewers could be gone too. I'm gonna keep an open mind here, but I really don't like Jalen Milroe. Really don't like him right now.
No, he's a runner more. He's up there.
Yeah, I'm gonna give him a chance this year. He's got talent, but I don't like it. And then you got Cam Ward. I like him. Maybe you take him at the back end of the first. That's okay, right? I could dig it, kind of, if he plays well. Then you've got guys like, what's the guy's name? Connor Wegman.
Mm-hmm.
Connor Wegman. Like, maybe. I don't know much about him. You got, I like Riley Leonard, but he's not like some blue chipper. He's going to be a guy who, he might be like, I don't know, a second round, third round guy that you get and hope he's like an adequate starter. He's not like some franchise QB, I don't think, even in the best timeline. So I don't know. It's not a great QB class. I agree with you there.
Yeah. And you're right too. Those guys we have seen in recent years, sometimes those guys can rise up. So the possibility is there to happen. I just think that the factor of that happening, or the likelihood of that happening this year, is much lesser than it's been in recent years. And it feels a little bit akin to me, Brendan, walking into this draft class year for the quarterbacks. It feels a little bit like the Sam Howell. What was the other guy with Oklahoma at the time?
Malik Willis.
It was Malik Willis, and then it was the other kid that went to New Orleans now, who was the South Carolina the South Carolina kid last year.
Oh, Rattler.
So it was Rattler at Oklahoma, and it was Howell going into it. It was Tyler Van Dyke, where everybody was hyping up those guys going into that season. It's like, well, it just didn't feel. It felt a little meh going in. I think KJ Jefferson was another guy, and he's still knocking around there. There's a bunch of quarterbacks been around the 15 years in college right now. But I just think that the end result on this is that you could end up finding yourself, if you don't go to Geno, having to do something where you're stretching for a guy you're not completely sold on, and giving up maximum draft capital to do it in addition to it. And if the option is that, or to stay back with Geno, I'd stay with Geno. But again, I don't think you have to make this move right now, because a year from now, you still have the leverage in that situation, and you've learned his fit in the offense and learned if he's going to hold up for another season health wise and all that. It's kind of on the team side to do that, I think.
Yeah, I would be on board with extending Geno now, because I do think you could still do it relatively cheap. And you might not be able to do it relatively cheap after the season, because, I mean, I understand that he's a lot older than these guys, but Jordan Love played like 10 good games and he got $250 million.
Yeah.
Tua completely fell apart at the end of the season and he still got $250 million. So quarterbacks, like, they're getting paid right now. And maybe you have some kind of like inside information that Geno's going to be a team player no matter what, and he's never going to push for the monster contract extension. And you're going to be able to get a good deal with him no matter what he does this year. But barring that, I would be looking to do something like this right now. But I don't expect it, to be clear, because I think that he knows he's going to have a good year this year. And I think he knows he's going to be able to get much more next year.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you on the this getting out ahead of this thing could be the way this is going too. And it could, this I wasn't wondering about Gino's people coming first, where Gino people come and go, look, we're not pushing for an extension. We're just letting you guys know, we're going to want to be up at here if we're not doing this here now here. And maybe that gives you food for thought from Schneider's perspective on that. Or just like you said, there's that, hey, I'll work with you guys. Let's just lock this in long term. So I know this is the 1 year off. And some of it's in anticipation of him doing really good in this offense, which hard not to kind of foresee. I've been saying, for the last, since we hired basically Grubb in here, it's a 4,600 yard, 35 touchdown season for me from Gino's perspective. And okay, he goes through and does that. You don't sign to a contract extension. Now what happens after this year? Well, he's definitely in line for a contract extension. But that's also the part that I like about maybe the possibility of you saying you wait out a year, because if you do wait the year out, maybe you're paying more of a price, but maybe you also do end up falling in love with one of these quarterbacks in the draft class, or there is an elder statesman quarterback who becomes available that nobody thinks would be available. I mean, Bills right now, for instance, I know this is pie in the sky a little bit, but like they're kind of, if it doesn't happen this year, are they finding themselves in a situation of going, maybe there's we got to turn this whole thing over a little bit. Like it ain't going to happen here with Josh on this, and not Josh's fault, but that the rest of the team isn't set up around that in the way they put it. I don't know that for sure. I'm just saying that could a trade like that show up, a la sort of the Stafford to Rams kind of situation a bit from years ago, maybe something like that. So flexibility and timeline, but you're right, man. If you can get it at a discounted rate, heavily discounted rate at that, Brock Purdy's going to be making $55 million next year.
Right. Exactly. And I'm not excited to live in that world. And a lot of people, a lot of people are kind of waiting for the straw to break the camel's back that makes the NFL do something, like maybe remove the quarterback from the cap, or like put a cap on contracts, or do something. I don't know if it's ever going to happen. I think they're totally cool with this model. I don't think they're sitting there thinking like, oh no, quarterbacks are getting paid too much money. What will we do? I think they're just kind of like, it is what it is.
I've tried to walk through this because there were rumors about a month and a half ago that NFL owners were starting to consider and turn this thought process over of having a quarterback salary cap. It is a bit of a process that goes like this. You're not going to increase the cap. Number one, the owners you can pull another dollar bill from their clenched dead fingers. That's the way they work. So you're not getting more to the players just for the hell of it, because they want to balance out the situation for the players. It would mean quarterbacks getting less so other players could get more, which you think, Brendan, this would be something that would push through the PA pretty easily, because the majority of the players are not quarterbacks. You only have 32 quarterbacks in this sport. There's a whole hell of a lot of other players in the sport beyond that, and they would benefit from this. They would be the direct beneficiaries of this. But for some reason, these quarterbacks wield that special kind of power, Brendan, where they seem to be able to tell the PA what's what on this, and that leaves us, like you say, to the bottom line of it doesn't change. So I think it'd be good for the sport. I don't think it's good for the sport that this thing's going out of whack like this, but the fix is not an easy one, or not easy as it would seemingly be here, because it's not just the owner saying, here's a salary cap now. The Players Association has to sign off on it as well.
Yeah. I'm just, I'm a big proponent of the nothing ever happens philosophy, right? Nothing ever happens. People talk about stuff, people suggest stuff, but then nothing happens. So I think things are just going to keep going the way they're going. Purdy's going to get 55, 60 million. And then you're going to see, the next contract that a guy like, I don't know, Joe Burrow gets in a few years is going to be, 65, 70 million maybe. Lamar Jackson could get like 70 million a year. I think it's just going to keep going. And either teams decide to all put their foot down as one, or it just keeps happening because there's one team out there that will pay it.
The other part is you're speaking about these money and dollar figures, Brendan, because, we're going to get to $500-600 million deals, right? And that does mean then 200 million, 250 million guaranteed. Okay, well, then what happens to there? Well, now you're going to owners and you're saying, okay, come out of your pocket, $250 million for escrow. Get that put in now. Not the end of the contract, not halfway into the contract. Right now, all of that guaranteed money goes into escrow. You start telling owners they got to come out of pocket a couple $100 million for a player's contract, that might also push about some change on that side of it as well, because that starts to sting more than a $20 million bonus check.
Yeah, and this is why I'm such a Geno proponent, and sometimes I get the comments of people who don't get it. It is so valuable having a quarterback that has already proven he will give you a break. Like,
Yeah.
what other quarterbacks have ever given their team a break? It's very few.
I am 100% in the same camp as you with this. It's part, and I think in your case too, I would say this is just in part the support that you and I have had for Geno. This is just one thing. That's the thing with Geno, isn't just one thing. Oh, he's just such a great player in the field. It's a lot of these things that we can go to, being a good leader, working his ass off, trying to it's taking less money when nobody else does that. It's all of that stuff together that is what pushes this support from us on this with him. And yeah, if it goes down, I would be in support of it too, because I trust in him in the long term here. I think he's put in the hard work. I think he's ready to go. I think he hasn't had the supporting cast here necessarily to fully shine to his ultimate best in Seattle, even here in the last 2 years. And he might be very well getting that here now. And so I'll put down that lotto ticket. And you're right. I think there's just some Seahawks fans that just don't want to hear this and that they're in their camp and you're not going to push them out. And I get that. I respect their opinion on it. I think this is just one of those places where there will be a difference of opinion between the two sides.
The Snail, thank you for the $2. Extend Geno, use the money for Reddick Super Bowl. So if you trade for Reddick and you don't extend him, do you think he'll get the message like nobody wants to pay you? Or
No.
do you think, or is he just going to get passed around like a bong this offseason between a bunch of teams that don't want to extend him?
I mean, he probably comes back week 11 and then you can get accredited for a season if you come back by that point. And that's a little bit of what Brandon Ayuk has threatened with the San Francisco 49ers. But with Reddick, I don't know if there's really, to me, I don't see I wouldn't go for him as the edge. Let me put it this way, Snail. And I don't think Reddick's bad, but he is a guy doing that Chase Young, pick his spot thing, right? This is not what you want your edges to do, where they're getting locked in on the sacks and the pressure numbers and the playing the run thing. Yeah, I'll get around to it. I'm going to get after that quarterback, though. And now you stop having a guy playing with as much balance. Why do you have Nolan in there out of Georgia? Nolan was one of your best run defenders coming out of that draft off the edge in that class. You're getting a guy with ultimate upside to do both things, and you're directly moving Reddick basically off. I know they have another guy there that's technically their kind of starting edge there, but you're kind of moving off because of the presence of Nolan being there. And so with Reddick, he's a guy that's done a good job of really finding his stride off the edge from what the Cardinals were doing early on in his career. But for the price, I don't know if I'd go there. And Brendan, don't you think there'd probably be a guy around the trade deadline off the edge that becomes available, knowing how this plays out usually in an NFL season, that might be a little bit more enticing?
Yeah. I think the play would have been for Judon if you were going to do something like this over Reddick. But realistically, you already paid Nwosu. You're going to have to pay Mafe at some point. You might have to pay Hall in a couple years. The edge room is not in a bad spot. I don't feel like you need to give up an asset for an edge rusher right now. Personally.
Would you have done a third for, and I agree with you on the Judon thing, by the way, that would have preferred him over Reddick. Would you have given up the third for Judon?
You have to pay him too then, right? Presumably you got to give him a bunch of money. I don't know, because then you're losing a bunch of stuff in a year or two. Like, we're not that far away from having to make some tough decisions on some of these players on defense. Like, there's a scenario where Devin Witherspoon in a couple years is getting $120 million. And you're going to have to make a tough decision on a guy like Woolen. Are you really going to pay two corners that kind of money? I don't think so. And then you bring in a guy like Judon. You're like, can I keep either of these guys? Are we letting Mafe go now? Or are we going to let a guy like Byron Murphy in a few years is going to want a new contract? What if he's a dominant player these next 3 years? And we just gave Leonard Williams all this money. I don't think you can financially make it work, but I think he's worth it. And if we didn't have a guy like a Nwosu, I'd say, yeah, let's go. But we do.
Yeah, same. And I think you got to roll with what you got. I think there'll be some deal there that you can get around the deadline. That seems to be the one position, edge rusher trade deadline, where there's a team that thought they were competing, isn't competing, has a guy available maybe last year of his deal, maybe not as much of a fit with a new regime there, like we did with Dunlap, for instance. So I think that's the route I'd probably go, rather than kind of having to deal with the whole Reddick issue there. I certainly don't want to pay Reddick. I'll say that too on top of it.
Right. So yeah, I'll pass on that, but I like the idea.
I do, Snail, yeah. And you're certainly solidifying at that point the edge to a great degree if you could bring in a guy like that.
Mo Maggot, thank you for the $2. Worst run organization, Browns or Jets? It's got to be the Browns, right? Yeah, I feel like it's probably the Browns.
I would say the Browns because of owner interference. And that's the worst thing for any organization to me. It's held down the Cowboys for years. It's holding down the Raiders organization. Owner interference and them just having even just too much of a small hand, especially in the major decisions. In the case of the owner with the Browns, I mean, this is a guy that supposedly was the guy pushing for Johnny Manziel and the push for the trade there for Watson. In the Jets case, Brendan, I think that they've more, certainly didn't show any. This is egg on your face as far as Douglas and the GM with this Reddick thing, right? Like, there's no way you don't look completely a little bit inept in this situation, trading for a guy like that and acting like he wants a contract extension, like that. Yeah, that's duh, dude. What? So it's a really bad look on their part. I don't fault them as much for the Rodgers thing because the defense playing good. You're in that state like the Colts were a couple of years ago, where you're just desperately doing what you can kind of do to try to, like, if we could just get this to a legitimate state, the rest of the team's good and we're going to be good. And you get desperate in that. And that's a little bit coming back to the Geno talk we just had, Brendan, where you don't want to be in that state as a team where everything's good and then you don't have the QB there and you're out there just desperately looking around for the guy. Now at that point, that's how teams get driven to just suddenly make just the pick anywhere of a quarterback in the draft or to try to trade for an older guy who's kind of past his ability level. And you don't want to be there. But I would go Browns. Owner interference is the worst.
Yeah, I think they drafted Johnny Manziel because a homeless guy told the owner to
I think
draft
that was
Johnny
something
Manziel.
like that. Yeah, I do. That's a legit, I think, a legit story.
I mean, that's pretty bad. That's tough to justify.
It's a kill. To me, it's the destroyer of worlds as far as organizations in the NFL. If you have an owner from top down that's starting at the top and he's dumping drinks on fans like Tepper out of Carolina, or he's coming in and he's saying, hey, do this, not that. I mean, you saw the cut of Carolina's daughter talking, and I think Dave Canellis is in the room there, and she's talking about who she wants on the cut. It's a behind the scenes, and they're in the middle of the draft room having the talk, and she's like talking about who she wants them to take. And you can see Canellis is like in the clip, he's just, he's not looking at her. He's like, no. And you go, just stay out of it. Stay out of it. They can't help themselves, though. And at least with the Jets, you can point to it being more the GM on that. And he did the Adams trade on his bet. That's a good one on that side of it. He's had some decent drafts.
Right. Yeah. And, that team was probably going to be very successful last year, and then Rodgers got hurt. I'm not even super high on Aaron Rodgers at this point, but that team had a very good defense. And I think with Aaron Rodgers in there, they are a playoff team, clearly.
Yeah, agreed. The quarterback position's been quite simply non-functional for them. And so getting a guy in Rodgers' case, he doesn't have to be MVP Rodgers, but just be functional. And that team will get in the playoffs for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right. So one last thing about the offense that I want to talk about, and this is a little bit more in the kind of concerning area. How do you think this interior is going to shake out? Because we know what's happening on the edges. Cross on one side. Other side is Lucas if he's healthy, Fant if he's not. But today we got word that like Christian Haynes got his first work with the starting group. It had been Bradford. And then today they actually gave Haynes a chance. How do you feel like it's going to land when the season actually gets here?
I think Bradford solidified himself at right guard. I think that my general feeling on this is just, it's like a Bucky Brooks, I think, who was like attached to the Seahawks organization. He's putting up players that are second-year guys that are not highly drafted guys he thinks are going to take a step forward this year and what he's hearing through the league. And he had Bradford as a guy listed on there. I thought the tape looked really good on Bradford this game too, from what I saw from him from right guard. Improvement, even from what we saw from him last year. When we get to the left guard spot, Laken Tomlinson, his fit for this scheme, I went back and did my double deep dive onto Haynes after the draft, Brendan, and I did come away thinking a little bit more securely than when we were at the draft of going, well, it does really feel more right guardish when it's all said and done. Like I keep wanting to put him to left guard, but this does feel right guardish. But with that said, you end up you come back to the side of, well, Laken doesn't have the athleticism. Who else are you going to there? A McClendon Curtis, a Satella Lamea? It may be that Haynes is just going to have to kind of try to figure it out over there because they feel good about what they have with Bradford, and they're just a little in the unsure stage of things with Lincoln if he can't quite hold up all the way around. But I will say that Lincoln did great in pass pro. You're going to be throwing way more than you're going to be running in this offense, and he is a steady Eddie vet, to have on that inside if all things being equal. But I think the team's pulled a little bit, Brendan, to get some of that athleticism into that spot and not be restricted there.
Yeah, and earlier this offseason, I remember that the coaches were kind of talking up Laken Tomlinson as being like a really good leader, really good veteran presence in the locker room, trying to kind of pump him up a little bit. But I'm just having a hard time buying that one. And honestly, what I saw in that game, like I think it was the first play of the game, he gets beat on a run play, and it's like a 1 yard gain because he gets beat. I could have been wrong, but I think it was the very first offensive play of the game. He just gets whipped.
No, your point, that's because he held up in pass protection, but he did not hold up in the run game in this. And that is in the inverse of what you thought you were going to get from him here coming in this game. You thought, well, he'll be a road grader. That's the thing he does really well. That's at the forefront of his skill set.
Yeah,
you're right. It wasn't there.
Yeah, and I know he played a little bit better after that first play, but it still wasn't great. And there was the clip from today of Jeffrey Simmons just like eating him for lunch, just destroying him. And I've heard some other things from camp about how I'm really bearish about Laken Tomlinson. I'll put it to you that way. I'm bearish.
I think it's well earned. I don't think anybody that interior of the line has not settled itself down throughout camp. I think McDonald has noted that a couple of times. They've swirled some guys through there, trying to find guys that'll fit in there and go. This is why you're signing Connor Williams. They're looking for this to get more stable, and it's not there yet. So you're going to try some different things and do it. I agree with you. With Laken, I was worried when we signed him at the time because of his skill set and how old he is and how poor the recent play has been. But that's that drive, I think, that eventually maybe gets Haynes in there in that left guard spot where it's not necessarily this is your best ultimate place to be long term as a pro, but this is how we can get our best 5 guys out there on the offensive line.
Yeah, I'm so bearish on Laken Tomlinson. I'm worried that RFK is going to display my corpse in Central Park.
You just got to make sure you got some witnesses. That's all.
Yeah. So I do wonder if at some point we decide, I guess the break glass in case of emergency option would be move Connor Williams to left guard and then have Oluwatimi at center. If you feel like Oluwatimi is better on the field than Tomlinson would be. I guess that's the only thing you could do.
You could do it, but I would reckon to guess, Brendan, that a big part of the contract that you just signed with Connor Williams is assurances that you're not going to be putting him at guard. The reason being is that Connor Williams is in a prove-it contract year. Connor Williams is not going to be paid highly as a guard. He's going to be he knows his best method to getting paid highly is as a center. That's his best position. And so you're right. It's again, that might be best for the team, but I would reckon to guess that he made sure the team understood coming in, I am a center. And this is why the Nick Harris trade comes down the line in addition to this, because they go, okay, you have the 1-2. We're not carrying 3 centers. So there we go.
All right. That's basically everything that can be said about that game, I think. I mean, special teams, we gave up a big kick return. Myers missed an extra point, but we also had a big kick return. So I keep saying, like, watch out. Those new kick return rules are going to mess with teams for the first couple months. And don't be surprised if a game swings on kick returns.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be the Wild West out there with this a little bit. So both for and against. So, and if I'm a coach that's got to wait, frankly, to not do anything to the first few weeks, if I can tell them I got to punt it through the back of the end zone or just kick it a mile high into the air, I'm going to do so while we kind of let the rest of the league figure out the rules of the road.
Yeah, and that's why Chenault is going to be really exciting to have, I think, because I think he's got a big kick return or two in his cannon here. He's going to do it.
It's part of the reason you gave him the guaranteed contract. Part of the reason he's guaranteed a roster spot. You felt in this game. And a great part we didn't mention in this game is that you showed how to utilize him too. Fly sweep here, bubble screen there. He's a gadget guy. He can be great in that role. Just keep him in that role. Don't expect him to do wide receiver things.
Right. So yeah, that's the game. All in all, successful. We're happy. There's some areas for improvement, but the team is looking good in that regard.
Absolutely.
So real quick, one notable roster move was made this week, and it was a pretty light one, but it is interesting. Nick Harris headed back to Cleveland. Hope he didn't uproot his family to Seattle this offseason because he's got to uproot him right back if he did. But he goes back to a team that he's played for the last 4 years, and we got a 2026 6th round pick and sent back the 2026 seventh round pick, which is kind of the quintessential. We want to get something out of this trade, but we know it's just going to be the littlest something possible kind of deal.
Yeah, there's no market there for Harris, and you got what you could get, and it's an under the radar move, but it's, to me, still a smart move. And that I think John gets a higher pick than he was going to be at. I think he also frees himself in this new strategy, as we saw this last draft, Brendan, where he can get on the phone lines and start burning those phone lines up in the 7th round while all those other teams are still picking. And he's not in the 7th round now, and he can just sit there and go down his list and have already been picked out and start up on the undrafted rookie free agents. And maybe that's part of what helped you to get such a good class this year, was you were out of that 7th round. So you were out of the draft. You were done an hour before everybody else, an hour and a half before everybody else. And so I think that there's a bit of that in this, but great move. You weren't going to keep him. You're not holding 3 centers. So you got something that you were going to give up for nothing. That's always a good deal.
And Whippler got hurt on Cleveland, and he jumped right on it. So that's good to hear, right? I think he got hurt, and Nick Harris was traded the very next day.
Yeah, it's same thing with Mike Jackson. If you can go out there and get a 6th round pick for Mike Jackson or equivalent to that at this point to do it, those are good trades to be made. Now, those aren't long-term plans of your future. So, I hate to use the terminology of assets, but they are kind of assets. They're assets that you don't really have. You're not going to really plan on really using that much. So.
Let's see here. Old School Seahawk, thank you for becoming a new channel member. I think this is on the Hawks Nest side, so
appreciate you, Old School
Seahawk.
Thank you, man.
Is this the channel that uploads like the full video of old Seahawks games from like the 70s and 80s? Because I know there's a channel out there that does it. This might be the one. I'm not sure.
It might be. Appreciate you for doing that. If you do that in addition to it, I love watching those old games.
Yeah, there was like I think there was one against the Oilers that I was watching not that long ago. Pretty fun in the Kingdom.
They're hitting back then too, Brendan. They're playing with some wild abandonment. So it's, you watch those games back then, you're going, don't see those kind of hits anymore.
Yeah. Okay, so Seahawks, for the first time since 1991, running joint practices with another team in the offseason. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. We had a long run of coaches who weren't into it. Holmgren, Carroll, I guess you would say Morey, even though he was only here 1 year. Dennis Erickson. Like, that's a lot of coaches that just did not want to run those joint practices. I wonder, I mean, it's not hard to figure out why, but it's just interesting that we would go so long without having any.
Yeah, I think it's, I think for when you go back to the long-term days back in the day, you had the 2-a-days with Holmgren, you had the padded practices at the high-level padded practices, even in OTAs. You felt like, look, I can get the ferocious physicality and all of that, the callus built up stuff done without needing to do the inner squat stuff. And when it came to Carroll, I think that he thought a lot of the same way, but with Carroll, he went through that transitional era there at that time where the 2 CBAs, I think, were undertaken during Carroll's time. And both of those 2 CBAs pulled back the practice time on the players and the padded practices, especially. And so now that's where we didn't make that adjustment and pivot like a lot of coaches have to say, okay, I have less of this to be able to get these guys ready. So I got to make up more ground for this in other places. And that's why it is, I think, a smart thing that you have to do. I think that there's some risk there involved because when you're going up against teammates, there's more of a we'll protect each other thing going on. Whereas when these practices stuff, you have guys trying to make a team, make a roster. They don't care about that guy across from him, especially if you're not my teammate now. And so I will do things that are a little over the line maybe. And that's now what's going to worry coaches because they're like, we'll have more injuries from that and that type of thing. But it's a necessary evil, I think. Don't you, Brendan?
I would say so, especially after these last 2 days, because overall, I think that the joint practices were a success. I heard way more positive than negative things. We did have the one injury with Pharaoh Brown, but we still don't know if that's serious or not. Like, I know they busted out the cart, but they bust out the cart for everything now. Like,
they do.
In the old days, if they busted out the cart, you were already making plans for next season. But now it feels like they just busted out when there's any concern at all. So we'll find out in the next couple of days if there's anything super serious going on there.
Yeah. And it's ankle, not knee, which is, I think, at least a little encouraging because you can get season-ending ankle stuff too, but knee stuff tends to be a little more automatic. When they cart you off with a knee, it's like, ACL's gone. So that part gives us some hope here.
Right. And I don't get the impression that it was any kind of a dirty hit or dirty play that got him hurt. It was just football. It happens in football. It's violent.
It's the intensity of these kind of practices. It's going to be ramped up too. So when you're practicing against your teammate, because that whole protect them, it's, I think, going to take you down. Maybe you're at 92%, where in padded practices, you're up at 98, 99. but it's that necessary evil to get your body truly prepared for the regular season. I think it's one of the reasons, Brendan, when we go back to why we've been not as good as tackling, why have we been more as a physical team in recent years, why haven't we felt like that? I think some of the reason is missing some of this stuff that you need. It's like you go in like the old Madden game, if you go practice and you come out of it and it's like, oh, your team rating is +4 on toughness. You're 4% more in your endurance now too.
Mm-hmm.
And you get those added onto your baseline numbers.
Wasn't there a Madden game where you could intentionally injure a player after the snap? I think it was like 92 or 93.
No way, really?
Yeah, I feel like that was a thing in one of the Madden games. You could just like twist their ankle off.
Oh, that's crazy. I don't remember that. But they like 90s, they had some games come out where they definitely went raw. Like, remember the hockey games back in the 90s, you could actually get into fights and stuff. So you could bust out, like truly start getting into the fisticuffs on the ice.
So I'm sure you've had the opportunity to read a lot and study a lot about the joint practices we've had so far with the Titans. Yesterday, today, and that's it. There's not going to be a third one. What were you positively taken away from those two practices?
Sounds like our defense kind of gave it to their offense for the most part over the couple of days. It wasn't that their offenses weren't without, some moments of having some spots. There's the Devin Witherspoon cuts that, you're hearing he had a couple picks, it sounds like today. And then there's a couple spots where he got beat in coverage. I do think fans need to, on the plays as fans, where we have the cornerback going up against the wide receiver and the receiver's got like 4-way goes and he's got these in the middle of the field. And you see your cornerback get cooked up in those moments, or another team's cornerback get cooked in those moments, you really shouldn't take too much away from that, because that's not game situations. And this happens at the Senior Bowl too, Brendan, where people get up on this in the Senior Bowl when they get the one-on-ones at that point with that in the same way. It's just you're putting a corner in kind of an impossible place to find success. But with that said, when it came to them actually, getting after it, and they got after it in these practices, it does sound like the defense on your side of it had the better end of it. I think today in the red zone drills, they didn't score one touchdown, if I read what I read correctly. And then offensively, right. Yeah. And I think offensively, you held up pretty well. It sounds like Geno attacked a little bit more down the field than what we saw in the preseason game. It sounds like our receivers who've been good throughout camp have remained good here in this practice. Bobo, DK, JSN. And so that's mainly, I think, what my takeaway has been from it on that.
Yeah, and it feels a little more real when it's not in camp, right? Because when it's camp, you're like, well, you're going against your own teammates. Who knows if it's real or not? Like, we hear all this great stuff about JSN in camp, and it's like, okay, that's cool. But then you hear about it against a completely different team, and you're like, okay, now it feels a little more real. And I know the Titans are not likely to be some great team this year, but it's still another NFL team that is very motivated to take this stuff as seriously as possible, because a lot of these guys fighting for playing time, fighting for roster spots. So I feel like coming out of that, and you see like Bobo today had 2 great touchdown catches. He had a one-hander in the back of the end zone. He had another one where he fought for a jump ball and got his feet in. It was just like the touchdown against the Cardinals last year. And you look at that and you're like, that means something to me.
I think it's got to, and I know I harp on this, but it's not you being caught as a man of the moment, Brendan. It's that Bobo has been doing this from last season onward. He's been doing it last offseason onward. And Bobo is a guy that is another guy in the fan base I see at times with those people coming up that are going, oh, you guys are celebrating a 4th end, back end roster receiver. Why are you talking about this guy? What's the point of it? And this is where you've got to, I make the example of comparing him to Baldwin for a reason, not because he's Baldwin and the player he is, but that's what you're getting here. The same way Baldwin forced you. You couldn't, undrafted Stanford receiver, wasn't crap at Stanford. We got Golden Tate, we got Rice, we got Percy Harvin. They forced their way with the mentality. They forced their way with the work ethic. They forced their way with their will to get themselves out on that football field and play well. And every time this guy gets his opportunity, he takes well advantage of it. And I saw it on the practice field when I was there for 2 days. It's been throughout training camp. It was there in these practices with the Titans, and you'll see it, I think, if you get to game day with him playing in live games again. He will excel in that. It's one of the reasons that I think that we've got to reevaluate our outlook on Bobo of not merely a back-end receiver who's a real good run blocker, but as a guy that is a true, maybe viable option in the long term to slide into that number 2 wide receiver role. I understand JSN. A lot of people will get caught up and say, no, that JSN's your number 2 wide receiver long term, and Tyler move on, and DK will be your number 1, but let's remember with this, JSN's going to end up spending the majority of his snaps into year 4, 5, 6, 7 of his pro career from the slot out of 3 wide receiver sets. He's going to play probably 60 to 70% of his snaps in that realm when he's going through his prime. So you're going to need a guy on the outside. And having a guy on the outside like Bobo that can win, if he can win in this way, on top of the blocking he brings, along with DK and the two giants that you'd have on the outside, and what you could bring with those guys, especially in the run blocking game with both those guys, I think he's got a viable future here potentially. If he can continue to develop and continue to stay in this mold, like we saw with Doug, who eventually by a couple of years in, no matter what his draft pedigree was, you had to walk away and go, he's made it undeniable. We cannot deny how this guy has forced his way into being a starter on this team, and in a viable starter with that, not just kind of just in there, but having impact on top of it.
Yeah, probably our best player from the joint practices was Woolen. There are a lot of cut-ups of him against Ridley, and Ridley's not doing a thing. Ridley can't catch a ball. So if anybody looks locked in right now, it's Woolen, and it really feels like he took last year's criticism seriously. And while the holes in his game are still the jury's out on whether or not he can improve as a tackler and a run defender, in terms of the coverage stuff, he is about as locked in as you can be right now.
Agreed. He has been another guy solid throughout camp, solid in the preseason game. We've seen a variety of cut-ups here with, like you say, with him and Ridley, just in Ridley's back pocket, and not Sauce Gardnering him, not Handsy Ramsey him, but actually just running step for step with him, stop and start, flip his hips. And he is absolutely the real deal in coverage. There is no doubt about that with Devin. And he can go be an all-pro even with some coverage issues or tackling issues, Brendan. If your corner goes get 6-7 INTs, you can go be an all-pro on that. And I do think the tackling can come up. What helps him, of course, is being 6'3" with gargantuan long arms. Talk about, well, I need to improve. It helps first being the like Trey Brown, 5'9" with 30.5-inch long arms. Like, there's only so much my man can do. You're given the body you're given. But in Week's case, part of what helped Sherman too, I think, where Sherman was the bigger cornerback and first wasn't the better tackler, but became a better tackler. Well, if you got the bigger frame and you can learn the technique a little bit better, it helps you to eventually get there, I think.
Right. So, yeah, I'd say let's do these again next year. Let's do more joint practices. A lot of teams do them with the same teams every year. Like, I think the Cowboys and Rams always do joint practices. So if they're going to go like
poor
this,
trainer for the poor trainer for the Rams.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
I got launched.
Well, the cowboy who did it, probably going to get cut. He's, not a 53-man roster type of guy. So he needed to do something to like put his name in the history book, get people to remember him.
I suppose so. He sent that kid flying though. He didn't just like baby tap him. He sent that poor kid flying, and it was funny. You get a feel for how strong and big those guys are versus normal people when they hit them like that. You're like, yeah, these are big boys. That's a back end roster, not even a like prime guy, just a back end roster guy to throw a guy 10 feet.
Yeah. Coda Dad, thank you for the $13.99 Canadian super sticker. Appreciate the support.
Thanks, Coda Dad.
Mm-hmm. All right, no message there, but thank you, Coda Dad, for the support. Okay, so we got a game on Saturday, and I know that there's a little bit of air already let out of the balloon. Callahan, the new Titans coach, has already said we're not playing any starters. So you're going to be seeing a little Malik Willis. You're going to be seeing a little Mason Rudolph. You're going to be seeing Calvin Ridley collecting splinters on his butt on the bench. Tony Pollard on the bench. Skoronski on the bench. And McDonald basically said, yeah, we're going to be playing a couple of starters, but not going to be much. I imagine you're going to see a little Byron Murphy. I imagine you're going to see a little bit from maybe a guy who's like technically a starter right now because of injuries, like Tyrese Knight, but he's not actually a starter. But it's going to be thin. So with that being known, what are some things that you're going to be looking for in this upcoming preseason game?
Well, it's definitely gonna be, like you say, one's tough because you don't know who started is, and I'm kind of, I don't know if you're at this phase, I'm just about on the edge of saying, let's just go ahead and bubble wrap Byron. Are we anybody in the room against that? Can we just bubble wrap him to the? I think I've seen him. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm okay getting a couple snaps.
Yeah. I just say that because he is a rookie, and I think they want to. And he's not going to be a starter at the start of the season.
You're right. You're right. He's going to get
Williams.
Yeah, he's going to get some run in this game. So you're right. I mean, he will. I just mentioned just for my own personal list, like let's get him in the regular season here. Let's see. He's fine. He's good. He's ready to roll. But what I will be looking for from this defense is in this offense from Tennessee, they will, I think, be bringing out some of their offensive linemen, and you'll be getting some of their, I think, guys that they're trying to develop, your Skoronski type that they had a year ago that they want to probably get going along. I'd expect you get a little bit of that. And what stands out is they've done a decent job. Titans, looking at the roster, of starting to kind of get the offensive line built back up. They brought in Lloyd Cushenberry. They got the Dylan Radins, Nicholas Patet-Free from Ohio State a couple of years ago out there. And then they drafted J.C. Latham, which another rookie, which I wouldn't be surprised if they try to get him some run. So what I'm trying to say here is you have a real potential viable offensive line to challenge your defense again for a second straight weekend, stopping the run. Big issue on this defense in recent years has been that it's one of the number one places for McDonald, I think, to clean up beyond changing your secondary coverages and being a little bit more exotic in your looks. Can you clean up this run game woes stuff that's happened for 2 years here? And I thought they did such a great job against the Chargers. That was a mighty test in itself, Brendan, not because of the dynamic play of the quarterbacks, but because of Harbaugh's dedication to run the ball. I mean, he came out with like a I formation look to start the game. It was like a statement, we're running the ball. And I think you're going to get some of that here today with some of that test. And I want to see the defensive line hold up in that way and look good. I don't know if we're going to get any Geno or not. But if it is Sam Howell, I want to see him continue he doesn't need to look light years better from the really rough start to camp that he started out at. He just needs to keep getting incrementally better here. He's a long-term guy, a hopeful long-term guy for this team. He's got time to develop here. He's not rushed like he was a bit there in Washington. So let's see him, come up a little bit. And then you talked earlier, interior offensive line. Can this thing settle down a little bit, especially at the guard positions? Can we get a little bit of good left guard play? Bradford, can he continue to look refined? If I guess he's going to get a good round of run. He's a guy I'm going to be locking in on, I think, a lot. Can he get a good amount of run and solidify himself there? So those would be probably the main things I'm going to be looking at.
Yeah, I want to see more stuff from the backup receivers because we're still. I think it's going to be Shenault and Derek, but it's not a guarantee. Well, I guess Shenault is pretty guaranteed, but Derek Young could still fall behind a guy like Aesop Winston or Cody White, who have both looked really good this offseason. So I want to see how those guys look. I want to see. Derek Hall's probably going to be out there, right? Because he's not a starter. We'll probably see some Derek Hall. So if he can keep it up, that's great.
Mm-hmm. I think you got to. He needs seasoning. He didn't have a lot of playing last year, and they kept him off the field, that injury, and protect him. So he needs the run.
Also, definitely want to see more Knight. If Knight can continue the momentum from last week, that's a big one because that is not something I expected. I don't expect Knight to play very much this year, but if he does, that's big.
You want to avoid desperate trades, Brendan, and you and I both look at this roster right now. And if we were to blind say the position that we worry that we might have to desperately go reach out for because of an injury situation, it's inside linebacker right now. Getting Radigan, getting, to your point, Tyrese Knight solidified in there, in those backup roles that you can rely on them. That is a big factor now to freeing, I think, Schneider up in other ways to maybe improve this team versus having to go to a desperate need a couple weeks into the season because your health isn't holding up and you can't trust the backups.
Right. So that's going to be cool. I still want to see the special team stuff, the kickoffs, covering and returning. That would be most of the main stuff, I think. I think other than that, it's kind of some of the same stuff as last week, but you can only get so excited when you know that very few of your starters are going to play. Yeah.
And let's throw safeties in there too. I think the safety situation, because they might only end up holding on to 4, and you've got Rob Marquise Blair back in here, and there's a good fight. And can Kobe look good again coming back into this defense and how they use Kobe? It's probably another place to keep an eye on in this game for how that sort of shakes out too. But you're right. We're kind of in that spot where definitely not playing as many of the starters. There's not as much to kind of turn through on that. Running backs, McIntosh and Holani, who's the guy that rises to the third role there.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get run on this team as a third running back for the Seattle Seahawks. That's something we've learned on a yearly basis.
I mean, Charbonnet's probably not playing in this game either. They've already said that he's got a little tightness in his back. They're going to play it careful. So it's going to be all McIntosh, Holani, and probably Kobe Lewis, right? Kobe's the kind of the grinder.
Guy. Yeah, he's a 3 yards in a cloud. That's just banging. And I like that. I like that they were going to him last week. He's just like, you're getting your 3 yards. You might not get like much more past that, but he's going to get you your 3. The dirty 3.
Mm-hmm. And again, the Titans, I've already said they're not playing any starters. So it's going to be hard to judge things, but we're going to do the best that we can. And if Byron Murphy's beating double teams and triple teams again, then it doesn't really matter who he's going up against. I'm still definitely going to single that out and praise it and get excited about it.
It is interesting to look at the Titans with what they're doing on their defensive line, Brendan. I was looking at their depth chart, and then Sebastian Joseph Day, Tavondre Sweat, Jeffrey Simmons on the inside, where they've got a lot of that. I know they're probably not going with Simmons on this. We might get a little Tavondre Sweat, but that'd be another place that maybe could be interesting on this if they run some of those younger guys on there and how we do in the run game, because that was a place that was pretty good for the most part last week. It wasn't bad at all, but a bit more of a challenge, and they're going to be tough to run on when you get to game one against that team with that amount of beef up front. That's kind of almost about 1,000 pounds pure there between those three guys.
Yeah. You can run the ball against Tavondre Sweat. That's meaningful, especially we're not going to have Connor Williams. It's going to be Olu, and it's going to be Tomlinson and probably Bradford or Haynes. So if we can run the ball up the gut, that's impressive.
How many pounds is Olu giving up to Tavondre? 50?
More than that. I think Sweat's like 380 or something at this point.
Oh, Jesus. He's big. He's a big boy, man. He might be up there. He's certainly not at what his listed weight is. He's probably like listed 340. He's like, in his bra.
Yeah, he's a throwback. He's a throwback to those old nose tackles that you knew weighed 400 pounds, but they didn't admit it.
That's right. He's legitimately a big boy in that way, but hard to move. So Olu's going to have to get some double team blocks or have some challenge up there. And then you look what they do with the secondary Titans. You go, okay, Quandre, Jamal. They're still waiting for that Caleb Farley kid from Virginia Tech with his back situation. He's injured still again too. It's they've kind of trying to reconstruct this defense a little bit this offseason by throwing a lot of numbers at it. It seems like looking at their depth chart, and see if it works or not. But it's interesting.
Yeah, were they the team that? Yeah, they drafted Farley. Didn't they draft another cornerback high who's been like kind of AWOL? Not Newsome, because the Browns.
Christian, I think you're thinking of the Christian Fulton kid that they moved.
Yeah, there we go.
But they moved Fulton. No, they brought in Jarius Sneed. So they've kind of tried to re-put this thing together. Like they bring in Kenneth Murray to be an inside linebacker there to help that get re-solidified down. And so he's in there as their man in the middle, so to speak. But then Jarius Sneed's kind of their starting corner. Quandre's listed as their starting strong safety right now, and Amani Hooker's listed as their free. Now they're going to run that's the thing about this game too, is they're running a lot of the McDonald principles here. So split safety look, changing the coverage pre to post snap. Same thing we saw last week from the Chargers. So you're going to get another dose of that this week as well, in addition to that. But they've added talent to the defense, and the Quandre and the Jamal things are buy low, hope high on those kind of situations. But I don't know if I see the cogent plan in place for what exactly they're doing with this team all the way around. Especially you consider like the Calvin Ridley deal was one that was to clean up for what you had done with the AJ Brown. Like you messed up the AJ Brown thing, so now you're going to throw all the money over at Calvin Ridley. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's an organization that does some kind of up and down things a bit, to my perspective.
Yeah, not super excited about them short term, but they can reset. They can definitely reset in the next couple of years. They got some stuff going on there that I like, so I agree with that. But
and Levis might be good for them. I mean, I don't know how much we're going to get of him. They've got a couple quarterbacks there that we might get a Malik Willis and a lot of him. And I'd love to see Levis. He still needs to learn to slide. He got tomahawked last week at the goal line.
Yeah,
go, buddy, get down. It's
I'm not expecting anything from Levis. I think Levis won't play. I think we're getting all Malik Willis and Mason Rudolph.
Well, let's see if Malik's come along, man. We'll see if he's taken any steps forward on that. A guy a lot of Hawk fans were chomping at the bit for a couple of years ago as we were leading up into that draft.
Yeah, Malik Willis makes me think of like a Madden player whose buttons are broken, so he can't throw the ball, so he can only use his joystick. That's what it's like. He doesn't throw the ball. He just runs around until he gets sacked or he takes off and gets some yards.
And then he usually gets like only 3 yards. You'd think he should go get like 10 or 12 and be kind of like a fast, go get you chunks of yardage when he doesn't runs, but he only ends up getting you like 3 yards. Like, how did you only, and part of it's that indecisive stuff you talk about where he takes 15 years to decide he's finally going to run. He's kind of already done this back and forth thing in the pocket. Okay, now the defense is already all the way back up now on you. Not a guy I was super excited about coming out. I'm glad we avoided that one. That was a landmine that was smart of us not to jump on.
Mo Maggot, thank you for the $5. Did you get a chance to look at Howell's mechanics in the previous game? It looked like the sidestep made the flat fall short. Sidestep made the flat fall short. You mean like the screen pass?
There's a throw he throws into the flat that he dirts, and he dirted unnecessarily, and there was no pressure on the play, Brendan. So it's a 3-step drop to the throw to the flat. And I think what Yolan's talking about is the front foot steps sort of to the target, and sidestepping, what he means is that he takes that front foot and he puts it to the sideline, right? So rather than you point it to your target, you're pointing to the sideline, and then mechanically that's going to take the throw to the sideline rather than to the player, and thusly he ends up kind of dirting it because he probably feels it midway through his, he's midway through his throw and he's like, oh hell, this is going to go to the sideline, tries to correct it, and then it just gets dirted. But it was pretty good overall with his base. There wasn't any extra hitches in his throw to his game. His mechanics with his ball is it comes up and it is an efficient motion, but it does take just a little bit of time on the transition point, to hear with it a little bit. So nothing that was bad in the mechanics I saw from him in the game for the most part. And he made some really good throws on some of those short out route throws, which I like those grub throws, Brendan. It's what we've seen here for years against our cover 3. You get off coverage, quarterback and receiver on an outside, receivers read it, that it's off coverage and probably cover 3. You get as a quarterback, you get the snap, you recognize that bail drop, that the guy's bailing at the snap cornerback wise off the off coverage. And that quick out route will be open every time. But you got to have it. It's those little keys that you have the quarterback lock into. And he threw a couple of those really nice throws and put them in the right spot because you have no air for throwing those out routes. You put it back on the man, and the cornerback's going to drive on it and pick it off. So it's got to be right on the right spot to the outside, lean away from a little bit. But yeah, on that throw, I think that's what you're speaking to, and that was a little bit there where maybe he just got a little bit lazy in his mechanics. It's a little bit of what I'd put y'all into what I saw from Howell on those 3 drives before the final drive where he looked a little bit better. There was a 3-drive state there where he kind of got into a bit of a malaise, and maybe mechanically, but reading the defensive line and what was going on prior to the snap, he was just kind of rushing to get into the play a little bit too much. He was rushing things along a little bit too much. That's that. Take a breath, take a moment. You've got the time to do it. You don't need to go that fast and rush that stuff through so much. That throw was open, and he just I think he got quick with it.
Yeah, I think I know what play you're talking about now. I think I remember it. I was having a hard time pinpointing it, but I think I know which one you mean. Yeah, it was actually kind of interesting because while PJ Walker did not really look good and he made a lot of really bad mistakes, he made some throws that were probably more impressive than any throw Howell made. He had a couple that were like 3rd and 15. I'm going to zip it in there on the money in coverage and convert this first down. Like there was some stuff there that was actually like, wow, that looked like it had more zip on it than the Howell throws, honestly. But then you have like the should have been pick 6.
Yeah, then you got the 2 on the other side of it. And that's where those neutralize that. Those bad throws neutralize the good, I think, from the coaching perspective on that, Brendan, because they go into it saying turnovers are bad. Turnovers are the worst. The worst thing is not us not getting the 3rd down conversion. The worst thing is you getting the turnover. And I think you got 2 different mentalities here, I think, too, where Hal feels probably pretty well set for this backup, whereas Walker's trying to make sure he puts on tape these throws that shows he can go out there and get it done a little bit, and that he's got a little bit more he's willing to risk because he's a little bit closer to that right on the line of, staying in or not staying in a little bit. So I agree with you, though. Those were some really big time throws, and they were on 3rd downs where the defense knows you're trying to throw those sticks. And so you got a real small window to throw into, and you got to put velocity on it at the same time, which is hard to do. Usually like to take a little bit off to get the ball in those kind of spots on that, but you can't do it when you got to put the ball down that field that far.
Do you think Walker makes it to our practice squad?
Yes, I do, because I think that part of this is we haven't had a huge number of quarterback injuries, but that's also what drives this. If we get through 3 camps of injuries that come through, then there's probably a team that goes and pulls on him at that point and tugs on him. But being that, he landed here because he probably looked at it and said, there isn't that number 2 spot for me in the league right now. Here's a spot where I can solidify to be the 3rd on the practice squad, good environment, good team. I think he kind of knew that going into that's the way that was going to play. So absent 3 or 4 injuries, you're fine on that. And he's a good 3. He's a really good 3.
Yeah. Sam Darnold could maybe use a backup now, right?
That's what I was just thinking about that too. Yeah. Maybe that reportedly they're trying to court the Saints and Carr on this one.
Oh, really?
supposedly, based on what I'm hearing. Yeah. I don't
Really?
know if that's
That's
going to work or
interesting.
not, but yeah,
Yeah. I think Tannehill's still a free agent. Just go get that guy.
you just look at it from the Vikings perspective too, take the signs, right? Don't you have to sometimes at one point or another as an NFL season going into it, just kind of read the signs of what's going on around you of like, maybe not our year. You're in a really tough division. Your 4th round pick dies in a car accident in the summertime. You have your number 1 overall selection is out the whole year with the torn meniscus. You've lost your starting cornerback to a torn ACL injury early on in camp. You've got Jordan Addison going down to a cart off injury 2 days ago. I don't know if I've heard an update on him and what's going on with him, but I'm guessing he's going to be out for quite a bit of time as well. Hawkinson is also down right now. It's just, you go, let's maybe turn this over, right? Let's just continue to develop the defense. We weren't going to be a Super Bowl contending team anyway this year, but they're one of those teams to me, Brendan. I don't know if you agree on this, like the like the Cowboys or a couple of these other teams out there that always seem to, Saints are like this, where they try to like talk themselves into it throughout the offseason that we got enough here. We can, we can put this together. And they really just need to take a sober look at themselves in the mirror and go, turn it over, embrace the rebuild. Seahawks did it. Rams did it. You can do it too, but these teams refuse to make that main move. And I think I'd argue it helps to hold them back and preserves a bit of their in-between state.
Yeah. Will Johnson it is. Travis Hunter it is. It's not that bad of a thing,
No. And you just turn around, you clear off bad money off the books on the other side of it. You understand you're in that pocket in that place of things and you get back around to it. But that's why I say the worst thing for organizations, Brendan, is the in-between state, because you're stuck in it. You're in the time loop, you can't get out and you're in there indefinitely and you just cannot get out of the damn thing. And it requires a strong motivation to get yourself out by doing kind of something that's a little extreme. It's hard to say, hey, rebuild year. Hey, we're not going to maybe be as good this year. Going to have to own this, fans, but the long term, we're going to be better for it.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Darnold is a pretty good tank commander. If that's the guy they trust to go 3-14, that's not bad.
Not bad at all. He'll get you there. He'll get you there. If that's the intended goal, he will get you there. And what's Carr going to do for you? Take you to 5 verse 3? Take you to 6 verse 3? Maybe. Yeah. And what, you're giving up draft capital to do it? You're more money's going on the books to do it. You're having to kind of make the money clear off to do it. No, it just doesn't make sense to me but they get that state, Brendan. And that's how teams like our Seahawks can now rise to contention a little bit faster, is because there's teams out there making these kind of decisions that are, to me, less than smart.
Let's see here. Radu Turkan, thank you for the $4.99. What did you think of Adam saying to Witherspoon, he better be ready because 49ers will get your ass? How ironic. LOL. What a clown.
You go ahead first. No, you go ahead.
I mean, I didn't get the sense that anything being said today was malicious. I think people were just having fun. So I didn't really think too much of any of that. I do think it's kind of amusing, though, that Adam's a guy who is already injured, by the way, already still can't play. I mean, this is all he can do, right? All he can do is talk because he can't really physically play anymore.
Yeah, and a guy that especially himself, got his butt burned by the Cowboys in coverage, and you were a big reason we got handled here over the last few years when you have played out there. The amount of barking that guy does versus bite, he's got a gummy bite, but man, you can hear him from the 300 row, and I understand that's that juice and energy. He brings the juice. Oh, great. You bring the juice. I need you to bring a good player. That's the first thing I need, more than the juice. And it's not all his fault. I get the whole injury thing has been something that happens to players. Sometimes you get robbed of it. Hell, it happened to his dad. But that he's out there barking around right now, and this is just how I go. It's like, I don't have a problem with it. It's football. They're just having fun with it. Maybe it ramped up some of the intensity, but it's also like, give me a break. What? We did you wrong? Like, we did you bad? Like, we did you, we traded for you. We made you the highest paid safety. Like, what? And we didn't move on from you until we were really certain that you just had nothing left in the tank. I think we did pretty well to do right by you, but I don't think he's necessarily saying that with that. It did make me kind of laugh on that front.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, Diggs was doing it all day, too. I don't think Diggs has any issue with the Seahawks. We paid him a lot of money over the years. He had good years here. He was, for a stretch of time, you could argue our best player. Now, that was because we weren't really having a lot of overall success. But, it's the same thing. Players get old. Players lose effectiveness, and you move on. I don't think he's actually upset about anything. He did have a quote today they asked him, did you consider going back to the Seahawks after they let you go? And he was like, no, that's not really my style. If you let me go once, I'm not going back to you.
Yeah, that's that place that players get to that I've always said that they just have that hard feeling getting to where I'm releasing you. There's no team out there that's going to offer you a multi-year deal. There's no team out there that's going to offer you a lot of money. So you understand we're not doing wrong by you. We're not like doing you bad here. We're doing you by what the market standard is for where your skill set currently is. And players don't like to hear that. And I get that, but that's the reality, the nature of how teams have to operate if they hope to be competitive. You can't reward players for past play. You can't reward them and have them be mascots on your team. It's just not feasible to do that, or you're not going to win. And what are we doing here if that's the case? Are we trying to win, or are we trying to have mascots? And, that's something where he's not off on it in his way. Like you say, Brendan, this is just the way it goes. So when people often talk to us about, hey, we're going to cut this player, can we bring him back into the fold? This is why we often say when that happens, it's not going to happen because of the direct quote there from Diggs. That feeling that Diggs had is the one that you tend to have when you're a player that's been cut away off of a big contract from a team like that.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, Diggs had a massive injury a couple years ago, and we, off that injury, gave him a big deal. Like we did pretty good by him, I think.
Made him a top 10 paid safety in the sport after having that, as he's heading in to be a 30-year-old player, by the way, not heading into his prime, heading in to be a 30-year-old player. There are teams in this sport that you can point to and you say, that's been a cold-blooded team. They do things in their own way there, and it's like kind of anti-player a little bit. Seattle Seahawks are not an organization that you can go to and say operates in that kind of manner. How many years was Brian Monet on this damn roster? And he couldn't give you nothing, earning $5-6 million a year. So they did right by the LLB guys. They didn't, people wanted to retire, or Marshawn wanted to leave after getting another contract extension recently, which meant all that dead money. They've been very, very good with their players, and as good as you can be with keeping it within the feasibility so you can still remain competitive. I think the Hawks have done very right by them players, especially compared to some other NFL organizations.
Yeah. And I think that's really about all there is to talk about right now. I think that we covered everything well. We talked a little bit about this upcoming game, and we're ready for these games to actually start counting, I think. I think we kind of wish that Chargers game counted for more than it did because it went so well.
It really did. And we don't know what the season's going to be, Brendan, where exactly it's going to fall. And that there is a lot of variance to the Seahawks team, both good and bad, on what the end result could be. But there is the hope this year too, Brendan, that this team can be good. And if it was going to be good, if it is a team that rises to contending status a year earlier than many people think is a possibility, it's going to be by them looking this good early on and continuing to build on this point to get to the opening season. Not to win games even, but to look good, to look like the message is clicking in from Mike Macdonald, that the scheme's being instituted on both of the sides of the ball seamlessly. And that transition is not going to be a bumpy one, but be a very smooth one. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of easy advantages there for this team to take advantage of in year one, Brendan, like the coverage thing, like the coverage, changing your coverages pre to post snap, that could bear out some really nice results for your Seahawks instantaneously because of it.
Mm-hmm. And I'm excited to see it happen. Even if this year doesn't go as well as we're feeling like it will go right now, I'm still excited to see the transformation because we need to see more, but I'm really getting the sense here that we didn't get a guy who caps out at being a coordinator and head coach. Like there are certainly guys like that, right? Guys who are meant to be great coordinators, but they don't have what it takes to become a head coach. I'd be very surprised at this point if Mike Macdonald ends up being that kind of coach.
I would be surprised if that as well. I think you would start to see some of these signs months into this process of him as a coach of Houston. We've got a little bit of a problem here. I don't think that we've seen any of that. And he really seems like he's locked in. He's gotten more comfortable with the media. I like his media press conferences where he's not giving you everything, but he's doing a good job of giving you a little bit of stuff on what's going on. He's being real with it. You can see how his messaging and his styling can resonate with these players. And it does seem like that's been the case based on what we've heard, especially Brendan, from the standpoint of seeing leaders rising up. Go watch the on the field mic'd up session there with Williams. And he's out there, the defensive tackle of the Seahawks, after signing this big money deal, giving pointers to these guys, helping them out actively, acting like a coach on the field. And it's what you've heard from some of these players as well that are the veterans on this team, taking on some of that leadership helm. And I've maintained, Brendan, that the final step here in this process, you've got the talent. You've got a front office drafting well and spending money pretty smartly in how they're putting it down. So now the final part of the process to get to contention is, yes, the young talent developing, but it's the young leaders rising up. that will be the part that takes you to contention, is those young guys, those guys solidifying themselves and getting everybody on board. And if you do that, that's when we're cooking with oil.
Yeah. All right. So thank you, Brandon, for doing this with me tonight. Had a lot of fun doing it. As always, we'll be back next week. We're going to have one more preseason game after this one. We got the Browns. So next week we'll congregate, talk about the game, whatever happens against the Titans, talk about whatever we're thinking for the Cleveland game. And then we're there. We're there at the season. So can't wait to do that. Thank you to everybody who came out to the stream tonight. Thank you. We had well over 400 people at one point. We still got right around 400 people. So pretty exciting.
Go.
Love that.
Hit that like button.
Yeah, hit the like button on the way out, whatever side you're on, my side, his side, hit the like button. Go to the other guy's side, hit the like button too, if you want to.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, like buttons are easy to click. They're all over the place. Yeah, so I will be going live on Twitch in a little bit here. So if you want to continue to hang with me, I'll be over there finishing up Claire B on Resident Evil 2 Remake. And yeah, all there is left to say right now after a game like that, after a performance like that, where it made us all kind of feel like this season could end up being a little bit better than we expected. Even if you had high expectations, probably got higher expectations now. Even if you didn't have high expectations, maybe you're starting to question yourself a little bit. Maybe now you're starting to think, hey, maybe this could actually work out quicker than we thought. However it is you're feeling, you got to say it, and then you got to get out of here. So let's say it. And let's go. Let's get ready for this game on Saturday. Let's get the Titans and go Hawks.
Go Hawks.